Hi, I'm Matthias.
And I'm May.
And this is our annual Q&A.
Oh, we made it rhyme.
Every year, we usually run into a corner because we produce a long-format documentary every other week for the past decade. And
I think our first one was in 2015.
That was a bad idea. Turns out you can't just do that, but we keep doing it.
It's
so
true.
I'm slowly dying faster.
It's fine. So we figured out a way out of that. We do a Q&A once every spring.
It's not helping, but it's helping.
It is. It helps regain some sanity. We get a little bit of our schedule back. I've got like one hair that wants to fall on my eye. Okay. So here's the thing. We start answering questions, and their patrons submitted questions. So the guys that are donating $1, $5, some of the $20 crazy dollar people,
Right.
they donate and they get to ask us one question, and we consolidate all of them.
Right.
Last year was our biggest one. We have, I think, 132 questions. This year, we have 169. And we don't stop when we start answering. We just continue on. So last time it took us 8 hours to film all of it?
I don't know. It's a marathon because we do have to let the camera cool down every once in a while because we use an SLR. It's
a process.
And this is the most tired we've been starting.
So you basically get to see us slowly lose our sanity. And don't worry, I made the questions at the end a little easier for us. Like I shipped all the easier questions to the end of the thing because we're not people by then.
Yeah, opinions go at the back.
Oh no.
All right. Well, I guess we should just get into it then.
Yeah, sounds good. First question. What is the most odd or frustrating, mouse is in the way, weapon to open/see the internals? I already screwed up the first question. You noticed that at one point out. This is not good.
We've had some frustrating firearms, mostly in terms of getting them back together, not getting them apart.
Yep. So Pedersen device, that was a fun one for you, and then Bruno.
Well, only because I was rebuilding it.
Yeah.
Winchester 1907s are notoriously weird to put back together, along with... we didn't do it for the show, but I've been inside a Winchester 1911 shotgun. But I will say, generally for the show, it's solid frame revolvers because you can't see anything what's going on until you start like poking things out. And especially with the British ones, the threading's not always all that great. So,
but it says, what's the most odd or frustrating? I bet like on the show shaw, you know, the arm that's on the show shaw, what is that? Is it the US one? That if you get the screws just wrong on it, or is it the French one?
I don't even remember what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, it's something like a full takedown entirely of it, like basically screws up the timing of it. I forget.
Oh, I don't even recall now. It's been so long.
I know.
I'm awful at this. I will say that the most frustrating for me right now is actually not even a gun that I've handled, but we know Danny over at the Cody Firearms Museum, and they have the Berdan there. What is it? Light machine rifle is what they're calling it. Okay. And it essentially has an encapsulation towards the center of its construction that they theorize they know how it's supposed to be removed, but it doesn't want to move. And it's one of one, so you can't remove it. So they're not really sure what's in there, which is really frustrating to hear.
It is very frustrating. Could they X-ray it?
I'm not sure what they're going to do. I have a theory. Having had it described to me, I have a theory of how it should come apart. But unfortunately, I haven't been back over to Cody to play with it.
Do you think they'd let you?
Yeah, I think Danny...
I think they would let you, but would they let you?
I think they would let me because I actually have a track record of being extremely delicate.
It's true.
And careful.
We've also repaired rifles or put them back together properly, like the Bang rifle that we were up at the Springfield Museum.
Yeah. We had a whole situation with a Bang rifle that was at Springfield. And I actually pulled the bolt out of it. Oh, I pulled the bolt back to check it. And it just came out. And the curator, Alex McKenzie over there,
what?
Was like, I'm sorry, guys. I'm wiping my eyes because the pollen in here is so bad right now. Alex McKenzie was, he's going, what did you do? And I was like, I just pulled it back to make sure there's nothing in there. And he goes, huh. So I looked at it for like 2 minutes. I mean, not even, maybe a minute. I looked at it briefly and I went, I see no mechanism to retain this bolt except for if you were to like put it in and put a shim in here and tip this thing that I can see down in this crack, you know, and then it would hold it. I think it would hold it shut. And he goes, that can't be right. And I was like, no, it can't be right. Why would you use a shim to put your gun back together?
Right. What? As a soldier, how are you supposed to have a shim on you to just do that?
To be fair, anyway, so he takes the gun, he sets it aside while clearly he knows I didn't do this. Somebody else put it away that way. So he sets it aside, and while I'm doing other things, he comes back hours later and goes, I think you have to use a shim to put this... He's being funny. Like, he knows he's doing it.
Yeah.
But we really, it seems like you do need a specialty tool.
And then he did it. He got it in there, and then he promptly went, now how did whoever did this before me manage to get it this way? And he promptly then broke it again to then do it to fix it again.
He probably actually has figured it out now, because this was years ago. I just never had a chance, because we were busy doing other stuff that day. I didn't get to come back and look into it. One of these days, I really do need to go back and film that and figure out what the heck was going on there.
That'd be interesting.
But yeah, I'm always
But that Berdan light machine rifle, they're looking at it being like, that's. I'm curious now what's in there.
I am frustratingly cautious with the things that I bang on.
That's true.
All right, what's the next
There's
question?
a sentence for you. What in the world went wrong with the M14 rifle?
You gotta keep reading.
I do have, okay. This gentleman or gentlewoman has heard before that there were so many problems with trying to manufacture it, and they suffered from constant quality control problems. Apparently, one of the key problems they had was that they could not reuse any M1 Garand tooling for the M14 manufacturing.
All right, are you ready for this? I have no clue.
I've started the research on that.
I know what an M14 is.
Uh-huh.
I know I've handled a live one.
I think Ninehole did a video on it like 10 months ago or something like that, talking about it.
Yeah, so the problem is, and I'm not throwing shade at anybody I know. I mean, I could, but the problem is anybody that's going to get into this, C&Rsenal's famed for being C&Rsenal because we go deep.
We go very deep.
We'll take the primary most accepted book on a topic, and I'll rip it apart trying to find anything that's missing, you know? And I'll layer in whatever I can with original data. The M14 has a very discussed history, which means it's just more noise for me to sift through, and we haven't done an episode on it, so I haven't.
Right.
I've heard a lot of things about it. I've handled one in person, casually. I can't say that I've done any real digging on the tooling or anything to that extent. And to do so, I'm going to have to go to primary source material to double check the source. Even if I read a book, I'm still going to have to double check sources because misrepresentation of primary source material happens all the time in the US stuff.
Yep.
So, unfortunately, I don't know.
Sorry.
And I couldn't necessarily tell you who would know unless you have someone that's citing ordnance files very specifically. And even then, those can be tainted by whoever's trying not to get in trouble at any given moment.
Yeah. To be fair, like I've heard things where they're like, well, it came out like later than it needed to. Like there was a lot of build up with it, and then therefore other stuff was already coming out, and it kind of just ended up getting pushed out of the way.
Then there's the whole thing with like Europe and the FOUL and the US being like, no, we'll totally join you if you adopt this cartridge, and it's like how much that story is true or apocryphal, I don't know. I have to go, unfortunately, really unpack it. And some of the stories where it's like he said, she said, you have to go both sides of it.
Right.
So, unfortunately, that's going to have to wait until I have time to actually do the episode.
One day. Let's see, your next question. Was any testing done or information available on Swiss rifles K11 through K31 related to cold weather operation?
I'm absolutely certain they did test them in the cold, but I do not know specific tests.
I don't remember off the episode if we talked about that at all.
If it's not in the episode, I don't know it. That's always the rule with
We did do the K11.
I do. By the way, every Q&A get a little sad because people ask me questions that are like follow-up to episodes we've done, and my answer is, well, I spent about 2 weeks with that gun then, and then every 2 weeks since then I spent with a different gun, so I don't know. Because it's like I just...
You know most intimately right now? The Adams gun. Oh, no, technically...
Chilean Mauser.
Yeah, we just did Chilean Mauser. Oh my God, we literally just did
I've already forgotten a lot about the Adams. It's gone. Because it's
you have to stack so much data, and you don't have a photographic memory, so you're screwed.
Right. But the person that asked this question, because he is more in tune with the Swiss stuff, would be Bloke on the Range.
Yeah.
So you should go over to his channel, Bloke on the Range.
And ask him.
And you should definitely drop him a note.
Every comment, every video.
You don't have to do that. He'll respond. Actually, just say something wrong on Twitter. He'll show up.
Oh, yeah, he does like responding to that. Oh, crap. He does watch these.
Yeah.
He's going to be very irritated.
He already knows. He made a meme on our Discord about baiting somebody. And I said, excuse me, I need somebody to change this meme so that it's about me baiting Bloke. And then Bloke himself made a meme about me baiting Bloke.
That's
so
true.
he already knows.
Yeah.
Like,
I remember you were talking about Lee Enfields and Look on the Range is typing response. All right, next question. Yeah, guys, we're going to answer these questions to the best of our ability, but if some of them did require a mountain or several research times.
There are a number. I was willing to give everybody 5 to 10 minutes, but when there's 169 questions, I can't give you more than that.
That's when we die.
Yeah.
All right, next one. What firearm has your research shown to be the most misunderstood in the general public perception? Whether misunderstanding the mechanism, the use, the reliability, etc.
This is a game of most versus least. Do you have an opinion on this one?
Well, I mean, I hate to kind of cheat because I know you typed a little note on there
are you
for
reading
yourself,
my note?
but it is true that our perception of revolvers has rapidly changed in just a few years because of the research that you have been putting together.
It's on several levels. And so this is the thing. I've become a revolver guy, but I didn't mean to
By
be.
accident?
Right.
Yeah. Because
it's not.
What was your interest? Wait, hold on. Before you even started the deep diving, before the first thing that got you interested in further deep diving onto it, what was your real actual interest in revolvers?
None. I don't have any.
That's my question for this Q&A.
I have no interest in the revolvers.
Okay.
Specific to anything else. As a matter of fact, I'm a long rifle guy, and that's what I was collecting and everything. I was completely happy.
That was your World War II collection when we started.
I'm not even like a handgun guy. Somebody left her alarm on for the thing.
Bad person. Ignore me.
So,
These aren't as strict on the audio restrictions. I'm a bad person.
what happened was...
What had happened was...
When it comes to semi-automatics, rifles, all the other stuff, you'll read a bunch of sources, and somebody will be more or less familiar with the competitor of what they're talking about.
Yes.
And they'll get stuff right or wrong, you know? But not by much. Mm-hmm. It's never gross errors. Mm-hmm. When it came to revolvers, it was either constant gross errors or total misunderstanding or worse yet, a complete absence of even understanding what else existed. So a good example of this would be, there's a beautiful Smith & Wesson book out there that I was reading about the number 3 series, trying to understand the differences between all of them. And then there's one double action. Mm-hmm. It's technically the number 3 New Navy, but then they would call it like the first model double action, which is like the collector's term, which is actually really hard to... The SEO on that is terrible. I actually like the New Navy.
Yeah, it's almost as bad as C&Rsenal.
Yeah, thank you. But looking at that gun, the author has these beautiful drawings from before the gun was adopted in which several lockworks were considered. Mm-hmm. These lockworks, to my eye at that time, because I had done some episodes for C&Rsenal with revolvers, immediately stood out as like a Chambeau Delvine and something that I would later find out is called a Fanyu. And I went, oh, he didn't even know these exist, you know?
Yeah.
Along those lines, I kept trying to say, you know, we'd have early revolver episodes and I'd be like, oh, this is like, we kept having to say everything was like a Garand or a Nagant or whatever.
You said like marionette like earlier on. Marionette, sorry. In marionette. In the, shoot, I forgot what episode.
Well, marionette was stage 2. So what happened, you're getting a little ahead of this, but essentially I kept referring to what other authors were saying. They would say, oh, this is a whatever action, a whatever action. Finally, I realized, hold on, these are the same action that's being called 2 different names, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. And so eventually I get around to the point where it's just like, I got to figure this out. And I managed to get as far back as the Garand de Guerre. Mm-hmm. And then that was where I was happy to be able to at least tell you that most things are Garand actions at that point.
Right.
But it turns out the Garand de Guerre was actually based off Fanyu's work. Mm-hmm.
But you called it Warnet in between.
Yes, well, because Warnet was given credit for the rebounding hammer, but it turns out that Warnet's rebounding hammer was just actually a slight refinement of the Fanyu system. Very slight. And it was an attempt to delete the hammer nose, is really the key. It's not Warnet got credit for the rebounding hammer because his work was shown in Britain more, and it came to the English language that way, and then it got pushed back in Europe that way. Mm-hmm. And so he got all that recognition because his is the first with this simple rebounding hammer, but his rebounding hammer is actually identical to Fanyu's rebounding hammer.
Right.
It's just that he also then deleted a part and had this other part do something unrelated to the rebounding hammer. So that too got me going, oh my God. And you can already hear it, right? I'm sitting here going, hold on, the guys in the know would say that Warnet was the rebounding hammer guy, but then it turns out no, he wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so it just keeps getting deeper and deeper in that.
You know what I liked?
What?
Or I thought was interesting? When you found out the myth on the shooting German grenades out of the air with a shotgun. It turns out they just kind of fall straight down.
Yeah, it's not great. I still have people arguing about that one. But to be honest with you, what I found more interesting about that was that we found DuPont ads saying you could just shoot the grenade. Like, that was an ad of people shooting grenades out of the air in the ad. And I'm going, given what I know about human nature and what we see from, you know, people talking about warfare and stuff, I believe 100% that the ads are why everybody tells that story now.
Oh, yeah. Ads spread a lot back then.
I found letters in which they're like, hey, we should send shotguns to the front. They'll be able to shoot grenades. And then you have an ad that says they can shoot grenades. Not it says they can. It's just like a depiction of it. And I'm going, this is how this all started. I don't know if a single grenade ever got shot in the air, but it doesn't matter because
sneaky bastards.
The story was already there in print over and over and over again.
Well, yeah, the stories are really what sell.
Well, you have anyway, I don't want to get that far into it. The short answer is what's the least understood, I think, in arms history, and we're trying to resolve that at our own peril because people get bored of it, is revolver history, because revolvers actually existed in a much narrower window. People kind of think of them as ancient, but they actually existed for a fairly narrow window when you think about it. And then they were, just as they reached their peak, all of a sudden, semi-automatic pistols overlapped them right away. So revolver development really took a lot longer than people think. And then they were immediately eclipsed by something else, except the consumer market kind of kept them alive a little bit.
Right.
But that's a narrative most people don't think of when they think revolvers. They just think cowboy, pew, pew, pew. They don't think about this sort of ladder development.
That is a cowboy, pew, pew, pew.
Anyway.
Let's take a pause for the cameras. Okay. Next question.
By the way, there's still other things that are misinterpreted all the time on this show.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just, that's the big one.
Scenes... this gentleman has seen stripper clips give people trouble. I had to summarize his thing. How much of that is due to using old reproduction clips with modern ammo that might not be 100% identical to what was originally in use back in the day?
That's probably right.
Yeah. I mean, fair, yeah. It's either that or the ammo.
Reproductions aren't perfect. The ammo's not necessarily made to the same standard. The clips are worn. The clip bridges could be worn. A lot of people actually get mad at us because you will put a clip into a Mauser, let's say, and then you'll strip it off, and then you'll pull the clip back out and close it.
Yeah.
And they're like, just bolt through it. And I'm just like, yeah, but then...
Sometimes that's our only one we have on range, and I've got to keep using it for like 3 other rifles that day.
And then who knows how many later?
I mean, technically, it should handle it just fine.
Not necessarily, because they're not exactly designed to be reusable.
That's fair. But you know what? I don't like the should, because we've totally had ones just not take the hit so well one time, and he had to bend it just right to get it back.
You're only going to get so many so many reuses out of something that's supposed to be a one-time use thing.
Yeah. So yeah.
The other thing is, I think we underestimate hand strength. Hand strength back in the day was much higher than it is now.
That's
that and
true.
jaw. Jaw strength in the modern man and hand strength in the modern man are far less than they used to be.
What happened to the jaw? They just stopped chewing?
Yeah, we actually eat much softer foods than people used to.
Oh, crap. It's all the tube food from
That's
Sweden.
become a thing online, is people are obsessed with doing jaw exercises to tighten this up. Because there's a certain amount of non-genetic jaw, apparently. Anyway, the point being is people aren't working their jaw. You go look at like 80s TV, and like even the women have like jaws.
Wow.
Anyway.
That sounds intense. Okay. What's your opinion on the new generation of the Sub 2000? Is that a Gen 3 they're talking
Yeah, they're
about?
working on Gen 3. I haven't handled one.
I want to, out of curiosity. I mean, it looks weird.
I want to point out I love the Sub 2000.
Yeah.
Because I think it's fun. A lot of people are like, it's not everything has to be life or death. It can just be fun. It's okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
My problem is they have finally gotten around to solving the problem. So a Sub 2000 is a folding gun. You guys might want to Google it. I don't know that I have stock photos for one. It's a folding gun, and now optics are big. And so you need a way to get the optic out of the way because it folds up over top, right? And there's a lot of solutions for twisting stuff out of the way and twisting back or folding off to the side and blah, blah, blah. My problem is none of that keeps it flat. You fold it up, but then you make it twice as thick. And this is my problem with folding ARs and stuff like that. Okay, it's shorter. But how often are you in need of having something that's shorter but twice as wide? And people go, it fits in a bag. And you're like, yeah, weird with nothing else in the bag. You want it to be shorter and just as narrow.
Maybe they're worried about putting other things in the bag so they might clang up against said thing in there.
Or you put it... Anyway, it's really awkward, especially when the width is not the entire length. Anyway, so the new ones have a rotating collar, which is sort of like the Red Lion aftermarket forend that I put on my Sub 2000.
Right.
My Red Lion, though, goes 180 degrees, and then it folds up, and then everything's in one line, and therefore it's just as thin as it ever was.
One little video on it, that got like over 500,000 views in a few weeks.
This is good. We should go down there.
Yeah.
But My problem with the new one is it doesn't fold over 180, at least as far as I understand it, unless I'm wrong about something. It looks like it only folds over, like it cants over a little bit. So it doesn't do a 90-degree...
So it does like a V shape?
Yeah. So it still adds to the width. So you can fold it with your optic, great, but you've added to your width.
Huh.
And I just don't know why we can't go 180 and not add to the width. Mine works fine. I highly recommend the Red Lion forend.
We should go down there and you should take yours in the backpack.
Oh, I'm definitely taking mine if I go down there. Yeah. Anyway.
But we haven't shot it yet. We do need to try it. How do you properly care for a black powder cartridge firearm? Full disassemble, or do you just water and ballast all of them?
I think he's worried about the fouling and the sort of rust development that these tend to develop when you fire black powder.
Oh, yeah, and that can happen in Charleston, like overnight.
Overnight? It can happen in an hour. It's wild down here.
On a really humid day, it's actually quite possible. You can just go to and from the range and you've got rust at starting.
If you're in the worst environment like we are, a little warm water down the bore would not be the worst thing in the world immediately after you're done firing it. Mm-hmm. And then what you're probably going to want to do, if you're storing it, like let's say you've shot a black powder revolver, which is a really good example of a bad black powder firearm. Mm-hmm. Because the revolver means you have when you're done firing, you have a dirty barrel, you have 6 dirty chambers, let's say, you have dirty nipples in those chambers.
Yep.
And then you've got some extra gas leak and fouling at the back of the barrel, onto the frame, maybe down on the stop a little bit.
Oh, yeah, it's everywhere.
And then if you've had the cap blow off, you might even have some blown back behind the hammer, right?
Yeah, it's possible.
They tend to be brass frame guns, so not a big deal. But let's say it's all steel. That's a bad situation to be in, because what you're probably going to do is you're probably going to have to rinse the whole thing in like a sink or something with hot water in order to get all the salts out. And then I like moose milk, which is usually like a 30% dilution of ballastol into water. Mm-hmm. And then I would, frankly, I'm one of those guys that's like, look, ballastol's not that expensive. Water's not that expensive. I'll burn materials for time because I'm a very busy person. Mm-hmm. So I'll hit the crap out of it with that stuff. And then I tend to use a combination of scrub brushes, like nylon brushes is what I prefer, or brass if it's really sticking in there. And then...
Bore snakes for the bore.
Bore snakes are great for polishing. Here's the thing about me and bore snakes. I'll use a brush, and then I'll use... the Remington made these for a while, and you can get knockoffs online. I don't know why more people aren't making them. They make these squeegees. And it's like a rubber...
Oh, yeah, it's like rubber orange nylon?
Yeah. But the problem is they're not always in exactly the right size, so depending on your rifle, or you might not be able to get it. But if you can get a squeegee that's the right size, those things are great for black powder especially, because they'll just push that...
Do they really get into the rifling that well?
Yes. So what I tend to do is I tend to rough it up with the nylon brush, let's say, because with a nylon brush, I'm confident not scratching. I know brass shouldn't scratch either, but I'm very confident in the nylons, and they don't tend to... For me, brass tends to distort if it's a little... Because, you get in the black powder era, stuff's not quite 38, not quite whatever.
Yeah.
And your brass brush will distort in there and stay distorted so it doesn't keep the pressure up. So I like nylon because it'll keep the pressure up.
Yeah.
And I'll literally take a power drill and just... with a nylon brush, as long as I'm not hitting the crown or anything. Mm-hmm. And I will break everything loose, and then I'll hit it with a squeegee, and then I'll hit it with the brush, hit it with the squeegee until it's perfect. And then... what I tend to do is I tend to take bore snakes and put ballastol, like ballastol, undiluted ballastol. I tend to spritz it into the actual rope that is the bore snake, and pull that through so that it gets like this nice film on the inside of the bore. And then same thing as best you can for the cylinders. Obviously, you can't go all the way through the cylinder on something that's... Well, a cartridge you can, because you said cartridge. But I was saying worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So percussion, you got to kind of pick
Nipples,
at it. Again, we actually... I know they're a sponsor, but they do sell plastic picks from Ballastol that are helpful for that. Mm-hmm. It's almost like they're doing this for you guys.
Oh, yeah.
To sell product.
But in the worst climate that you could possibly probably introduce all this stuff to, this has done the job for them and they don't rust.
Right. Now, anything that's exposed to the powder, that's what you want to hit with some warm water, dry it off, and then oil it with something like Ballastol. And then otherwise, it's the same as anything else.
Not dripping, like a light film.
Yeah, a light film of preservative oil is great. Like I said, we work with Ballastol. The one thing you want to avoid is I've known guys to kind of soak everything afterwards, especially if you have wood involved. Soaking with something like Ballastol is going to... The Ballastol won't hurt the wood or the wood finish inherently, but being soaked in it is not great. There's also, I know there was issues with people having nickel flake because they were soaking in ballistol, let's say, or any other oil. And well, yeah, it's damaged nickel. It's a plating, and capillary action is going to cause that to get in there, and it's going to just expand and break up over time.
Right.
It's not really the product's fault. It's that you have this layer that is getting capillary. So soaking, not really great. It's more about getting a nice light layer and then just letting it set, and just the thinnest possible layer that is still a rust preventative barrier. Sorry, that was a long description, but hopefully it was useful to somebody.
All right. Describe the difference between Boxer and Berdan primers and if one is better.
So, Boxer and Berdan can take a lot of shapes depending, but in general, when people are talking about this, you're talking about where the anvil is. So you either have the anvil in the primer itself. For those of you who are confused, think of a primer as having a diaphragm and a hard surface, and then we crush the diaphragm into the hard surface, and there's a kinetic ignited powder essentially that's in there, the priming compound, that when it's pressed between these two surfaces sparks up and then ignites the whole thing.
Sure.
So I know I'm not using the most technical terms, but I'm trying to do this for a layman. So that anvil could either be in the casing itself, and then you've added this sort of diaphragm over it, or you can have a little cylinder that has the anvil and the diaphragm in it, and you put that in the casing. That's the big difference. In general, it tends to be that our Boxer is the one where the anvil's is self-contained. That tends to be a one-hole thing, symmetrical, right in the middle. And then Berdan tends to be 2 holes in the case on either side of the anvil. And a lot of people get frustrated trying to swap between one and the other because in the US market especially, reloaders tend to work with Boxer, but a lot of surplus ammo is Berdan, so you want to convert it to the other one by drilling it out. Berdan tends to be made case-by-case basis, so you have a lot of different variances in the Berdan diameters, blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
In terms of hand loading, Boxer is better for reusability. Mostly because, not just because, it's more available because that's what we're used to in the US. It's actually mostly because of the fact that the anvil is part of the unit. So that means that you can replace the anvil every time you reuse the casing. Whereas with a Berdan system, you hit that anvil and then you go to reuse that case and it gets hit again. And it gets hit again. And so you're smushing it. Yeah. It's not necessarily going to be a problem every time, but it is more annoying in that regard, provably. The rest of it has more to do how our market's positioned itself and therefore prefers Boxer. So Boxer is way easier to work with as an individual nowadays because of A, market, and B, technical.
Sure.
If that helps.
Are there any other pistols whose barrels lock like the TT-33 besides its own derivatives? How the hell does it lock?
Like a 1911. And then I had to go back and double check this question because you had reduced it down. He was talking about the fact that he noticed that the barrel at lock is slightly below parallel.
So like a few
on the
degrees
muzzle.
off?
Yeah, the muzzle drops slightly below parallel.
Okay.
And then at open, it comes to parallel. That is how the 1911 works. So I haven't done a full workup on the Tokarev, and if there's something I'm missing about what he's saying, but if he's just talking about the fact that it's parallel when unlocked and then below parallel at the muzzle when locked, that is true of the 1911. It should be in our 1911 episode animation. I distinctly remember discussing
Yes,
this.
I remember talking about Bruno with that. Because he was
Bruno,
like, this is often, it's driving me crazy. It wasn't until he went to drawings that he went, oh.
No, Bruno was working with the animation, and I came over to him and I said, hey, somebody had noticed something in an early image. I can't remember.
I think someone noticed in the early
Somebody noticed that it wasn't below parallel,
yeah.
and I hadn't even noticed it first. And so I went and talked to Bruno about it, and I said, hey, make sure this looks a little below parallel. And he goes, oh my God, that cleaned up the geometries a lot, because he had made the he had dimensioned everything and then put the animation together. And when he did so, he was like, wait a second, what is going on? Because he was trying to have it tip up, you know, like we're used to with Glocks and stuff, where you have the locking shoulder and the ejection port, which tends to favor doing that more. But no, actually the original 1911 does it that way. So a lot of derivatives should, but I'm not sure who all copied which barrel position for lock and unlock, to be honest with you.
Fair. All right, let's do one more question, then we'll take a pause.
Okay.
Would you consider the SKS to be more evolutionarily similar to the M1 Garand or the M14? I didn't think it was like either of them.
Yeah. So this is... I'm not sure if we're talking about like a cultural thing or a doctrinal thing, or if we're talking about engineering. Engineering-wise, they're almost unrelated. I mean, they both are gas-operated locking systems, but one is the Garand is honestly, to me, looks like it looks like you took a bolt-action rifle and you modified it to be gas-operated, and then you just went one more step. Whereas the SKS is actually... in a weird way, it's almost derivative of the Colt 1895 potato digger. It's a fully automatic system turned into a semi-automatic system, and it evolved from its own sort of operation. Right, yeah, it's its own gas-operated lineage versus converting one kind of rotating bolt gun into another kind of gas.
Yeah, it's not like a growth. It's more like a de-evolution. Yeah,
so in the technical side, I don't think they're all that related. On the doctrine use, I guess... the SKS is still technically closer to the Garand because the M14's obsession was, of course, getting in select fire and a box magazine is really the big differences between it and the Garand in terms of how somebody uses it. And so the SKS is just a semi-automatic carbine. In a way, you could actually argue the SKS is much more similar to the M1 carbine in the fact that it used a limited power cartridge and did that in order to have weight and length savings for, being able to be used.
Yeah, that's fair.
In all roles. I
can see it being a closer argument.
Yeah, it's actually kind of a weird comparison, to be honest with you, in that regard, because it's just not a service rifle cartridge. It's not the same locking system. It's not really the same doctrine of fire necessarily either. So, I guess it is sort of like it's infantry semi-automatic fire. So there's that. But then, with that intermediate cartridge, they were really starting to move into a direction that very obviously led to the AK.
Right.
So,
yeah. All right, let's take a pause. All right, next question. What is the lineage of the Smith & Wesson lockwork? Is it a Fanyu?
So, I'm not sure what Smith & Wesson he means.
That's a good question.
For our show, we would be like what most people think of as the K-frame lockwork. But nowadays, I'm not sure that this is what Smith & Wesson's using. I actually tried looking up like the Smith & Wesson's current inventory.
Yeah.
This was weirdly timed because I was at the gun shop the other day. And I went, I need a summer carry because I want to wear like little shorts with like an elastic waistband.
He likes poppy colors.
I'm going to put my gut over it. And I need... Well, that helps hold the waistband.
Over the shorts?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like, I take my height. I'm a fat old guy. You pull up your shorts and you flop your gut over them. It's fine. But I need a gun light enough to go into said shorts with some sort of reinforcement. I was looking at the belly band things anyway. So I started looking at light, small guns. So I wandered in the gun shop to talk to the boys, who I love. And I look down and I see these Smith & Wesson. I guess they're air weight still.
Sure.
They're like 5 shots. And I picked one up. I was like, actually, it's fairly light. It's got sort of like a vaguely hoagish grip to it. And it comes in pink, which is great.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. But then
I would go with those shorts.
I tried the trigger and I went, Jesus, how can they sell this garbage? Like, it's the worst. It's a DAO and it's just awful. I mean, it's better than some of the stuff we've handled, but I mean, I'm thinking it's a modern handgun. It shouldn't be. Was
it because it was DAO they made it that heavy?
I don't know what they were doing.
Because that seems sometimes very intentional.
It felt like, what was that weird CZ pistol that they had in Ghost in the Shell? The one that you cock off your hip. It's got the metal on it.
Is that the 200? You're talking about.
I can't remember the name of it. It had a very rubbery plastic trigger. Not as bad as that, but it had that same sort of just like, what is this? I was so disappointed. Anyway.
That didn't answer the question at all.
No, I got this question. So I was looking at Smith & Wesson's current lineup, and I was trying to get, I was looking at the models, and then I had to Google the models with a schematic drawing, but it's all none of them, they don't do 2D schematic views anymore. They only do exploded views.
Oh, yeah, because that's all anyone cares about is the parts.
So then you have to look at them and imagine all the parts
where
going
they go together and how they
at this
interlock.
Isometric angle. Oh God, it's so awful.
And you know what really sucks in those exploded views? Sometimes they don't group them together and where the other part's close to them. Sometimes they're just scattered everywhere. It's like, no. Here's the sear. Why is it all the way over here for the trigger?
We actually have another revolver question like that in here, and it's the same exact problem. I can't remember where it is, but we'll find it in a minute.
Okay.
The Smith & Wesson that you're used to seeing on the show, the K-frame style one, is a Fanyu derivative in the sense that they did initially do their own Fanyu clone and then differentiating from probably Colt, because both Colt and Smith & Wesson briefly had Fanyu clones. Differentiating, Colt stuck very tightly to the Fanyu all the way through the snake guns. Smith & Wesson actually developed their own rebounding system that technically makes it not a Fonyu, because what they replaced was very much the Fonyu rebounding arm, which is, that's where we get the name. The wraparound arm probably came from Comblane, we think. Fonyu is the rebounding part. Both of those features are gone, and they're replaced with a linear block that has a coil spring in it that just pushes back and forth, and it does the same thing. It rebounds the hammer.
It has a coil spring in it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it's like a housing with a coil spring.
Oh, okay.
And it pushes when it engages, it pushes the hammer. It goes under the hammer and hits the back of it a little bit at the same time. So under and back, and it pushes that thing back to rebound it. And it also forms a block so that unless it's retracted, the hammer can't drop.
Oh,
that was
nice. That's really good.
Yeah, it was not perfect because they had to do an additional hammer block. And then that was not perfect, apparently, when you drop it off the deck of an aircraft carrier. So they had to add a different hammer block. It was supposedly a rebounder hammer block, but wasn't that good of a hammer block. And then
mostly rebounding hammer block.
To be fair, the Fonyu is the same thing. The Fonyu is supposed to actually be a hammer block in the way its geometries work, but it can be overcome with extreme pressure. Which at the time, people were like, "Well, who's going to do that?" Well, apparently, if you have an aircraft carrier, you can get away.
People find a way.
Fun fact that I find very interesting, and we said this on an episode before: the side spring hammer block. Idea.
The one that's like on the Bodeo sometimes?
Yes. It has been tried 3 times that I know of. It was tried on the British Enfields. That's actually the earliest I can find it on. So the Enfield Mark 1 and 2s received side spring when the hammer or the hand moves. It's either hammer or hand. It depends on the gun. But when something moves, it pushes it to the side so that the hammer can fall.
Right.
Right?
Otherwise, it rests in the path of the hammer.
Right. That block was tried as a better fix it.
Spaghettio.
There was an spaghettio that was applied to the Enfield. It was an spaghettio that was many years later applied to the Bodeo. And then it was an spaghettio that a couple years after that even, was applied to the Smith & Wesson K-frame and others. And then it didn't work in all 3 of those scenarios. And all 3 times, even though the other should have known the other one had done it before, it was replaced with a rising and falling hammer block with a specific shape in the hammer.
Yeah.
To undo it. And so that, again, was the 3rd safety pattern on the Enfield. It was the next thing they did on the Bodeos, and it's what you see in almost all Bodeos because it was done retroactively to a lot of them. And then it was also done after that, the little rise-fall hammer block that you see in later K-frames, same exact thing. The same set of attempts at the same solution happened 3 times, and it seems the 2 of those times, they were completely unaware of the other times it happened.
This is like the Europeans forgetting how to get rid of scurvy, and then there was like a 100-year block where they all had forgotten how to get rid of scurvy on ships, and then someone went, wait a minute, there was something we used to take with us. Oh shit, turns out the fruit helps. So limes came back, bro.
So that was a side thing, but I just find that interesting.
Let's see here. This is about 8mm Lebel. It was a cartridge that hampered magazine-fed gun development as the French had to use the 8mm Lebel. Is this the worst case of a cartridge hampering a military, or are there worse ones out there? I don't know of any other... But to be fair, rimmed cartridges in general were a hampering issue for militaries.
They were. Some people found ways around it because they also have their benefits in terms of gas seal.
Sure.
But I kind of thought... I actually sat and thought about this one. I couldn't come up with anything that was worse because those geometries were rough. And they kept spilling over. And it may just be because the French really got stuck with 8mm, and that's the bigger problem. If they had just swapped off of it sooner, it might... If they had swapped off of it during the war, not that they could have, but if they
cartridges for shotguns.
No, because that only limited the ability to use a trench gun, and even then you could have gone high brass. They just didn't. Well, all brass. But they just didn't until it was too late.
Yeah. It's the only thing I could think of that gave like a quote-unquote failure.
Right, but you don't have an entire country trying to deal with this BS while keeping up with other... Because you see the 8mm Lebel is so awful that it has weird spillover effects like the attempted development. It's not just the machine guns and autoloaders that had problems with it.
Yeah.
You also then have all these bolt actions that were designed for this chonky cartridge. And you're trying to convert them to the more modern 7.5 French, which was a much, much better cartridge. It feels like France spent a lot of time dealing with... And by the way, they spent a lot of time dealing with a mistake that they should have seen coming because they were told, you have to do this in an inordinately short amount of time that, of course, you're going to cut corners. And in the literal sense this time. And so they just did this sort of double step down from the Gras cartridge because they couldn't... they would not have designed 8mm label except for the part where they were trying to keep the case head dimensions to reuse what they had on hand to make this other part. In other words, it's a cartridge that only existed as a kludge specific to not having to change things because we're on a deadline. And the deadline proved to offer them nothing. I mean, that's the thing. It's not like they got that 8mm label out and then took over all of Europe before anybody else.
Although
it's
excellent secret was kept until it was out.
Yeah, but they rushed it so they beat everybody to the punch, and then they turned around and did nothing with the punch.
Oh, yeah. Instead of actually, refining it.
Yeah. Oh, tummy growl. Within 2 years, they were doing it again. You know, in 2 years, the Germans were caught up. So it's just like, what did you guys do? You cursed yourself for decades for 2 years of...
Yeah. Well, I guess they didn't... At least they didn't build something so crazy new that they... My concern would be like if it's like a country, I'm wondering if there's a country that literally made a cartridge and they went, okay, now we're going to design a gun that's around this cartridge entirely, 100%. Like, I wonder if there's a country that did that, because it sounds very Russian to kind of be like, all right, no, we're going to focus on this one thing.
But then you just proliferate that cartridge.
Yeah,
I mean, there's all sorts of little stories like that, but never ones that stuck for as long as this one did that I know of. There might be, someone might point one out to me that I'm just not thinking of, but boy, that was a big one.
Yeah. All right. I would like to know where you source your ammunition for the oddball weapons that you present.
Custom made, Bo.
Pretty much. I mean, we'll try to get cases that are close to what we need, and then from there, play with it.
We have become hand-loading geniuses in the sense that we're just determined to make it work through the dumbest means possible.
We've had
to have custom dies milled. We've had to... There's some sausage making things that people always ask me, like, hey, how'd you reload that? I'm like, no. No.
We had Triana Protection Enterprises doing ours previously, and now Suze handles them with you.
Right.
The two of you combined are mostly figuring out what the heck things are taking.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. And then there's, I mean, to be honest with you, this is sort of something people really underestimate is how much overhead there is in the show. Right now, we're talking about Chilean Mausers is what we just filmed.
Yep. 7mm Mauser.
Yeah. And yet, at the same time, I'm in deep talks with people to try to get a hold of certain odd British diameter cast bullets because they happen to have one of the dies in their collection or something. And so that's the kind of thing it's like, and that episode won't be made for months, if ever.
Right.
But I have to have this spreadsheet of, do I have access to what I would need to even shoot this thing? And the answer is well, no, because it uses a one-off bore. So then you're on ebay.uk for 2 years looking for something. Yep. There's episodes we could have been ready to do years ago that we're still stuck on very specific diameter bullets or cases or whatever that we can't find. We've also had to do very interesting things. I will say we have found a way to do a very thin jump up on bullets if we have to. It ended up not being used in an episode.
Oh, yeah, but it was a really good thin layer idea.
Right. So a lot of people are working with powder. This one I can't tell. Okay. A lot of people are working with powder-coated bullets instead of regular jacketing now. And we were trying to jump up in order to test a gun that was malfunctioning. It was definitely overboard for some reason.
Oh, yeah, that was not great.
We were trying to jump up this bullet a little bit at a time and then pass it through the bore and see when we started getting rifling engagement. And so what we found is that we could take a, oh, good Lord, my brain's shutting down on terminology. I'm so tired. The sifters, not the sifters, the the media shakers for reloading that hold the walnut shells. Oh, God, my brain. Somebody will tell me. It doesn't matter. We took the doodad that shakes the walnut shells for you, and we filled it with that powder. Then we took our bullets, and we torched them a little bit just to get them hot.
Just a little bit of heat.
And just, while the shaker's on, running, drop them in there.
Yes.
And it would just get one quick flash coat of powder, and then you could just pull it back out. And it's a little grainy, but it adds just a little tiny bit, just the thickness of those grains.
Yeah.
And we were able to do that a couple times and jump it up.
Now, it wasn't perfect for each one that we dropped in there. We had to then inspect each one to be like, this one's good, this one's good, ooh, this one got uneven. That kind of thing. But
we were able to add very thin layers that way. It was a very interesting thing. I think that came out of my head weirdly.
That was a long night.
And it didn't work.
Poor
and
David
nobody
Crystal
knew it happened. Yeah.
Have you ever found any firearms that it was generally accepted prior that there were no longer examples of in existence?
No.
Not that we've personally come across.
I'm trying to think. I know a lot of firearms that don't seem to be in existence because I have ordnance photos of all sorts of cool stuff. But so far, I have not rediscovered an extinct firearm.
Correct.
The closest to that would be there was a misidentified firearm in the Cody collection that I later figured out was a prototype Remington 11 trench gun. And I contacted Danny about it. I said, do you have this in the collection? He goes, yeah, it's labeled as this riot whatever thing. And I said, no, that attachment's for a bayonet. And he goes, what bayonet? Because it doesn't look right.
Right.
And we ultimately figured out it was the Rosalie because Remington was making them for France and they had been rejected. So they were probably trying to sell them over to the U.S. government. Just like the 1917 ended up taking the 1917 bayonet instead of the 1903 bayonet because it was already in production. So the same idea of like, hey, can we sell them a shotgun that takes the Lebel bayonet? Because then, all these things we made for the Berthier contractor. Sure. Yeah. So we did properly identify one that was, but that thing had been on display. Everybody knew it was there. It was just mislabeled essentially because of later attempts to repackage it as a tear gas launcher or something like that.
All right, let's do one more question, then we'll take a pause. As just about the only adopted single-shot to repeater conversion system, was the Vetterli Vitali just too late in light of smokeless powder?
So he's talking about the Vitali magazine, I guess, because that was also applied to the Beaumont rifle. Italy also tried something called the Bertoldo, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. It's kind of like a Kropatschek system.
Okay.
I don't know that I would call the Vetterli Vitali too late because... The problem is not that it was too late. It's the problem is once you go to smokeless.
Yeah.
That's the bigger jump, I guess. I don't know how to explain this. People really weren't worried about magazine systems until you had quick loading systems.
Yeah.
Now, the Vitali did have actually what I would call a charger. More a charger. I would call that a charger when I would call
it back out.
The British will call a stripper clip a charger, but I think that was a charger. And so, yeah, it did have rapid loading. It was a superior system. I think it was just too much expense for a country that wasn't all that wealthy to begin with to be really worth its weight in combat.
Yeah.
And then, it could have been brilliant for anything that was a bolt action. I certainly would find it superior to the Kropatschek magazine system on a 7184. I would rather have a Mauser 71 with a Vitali magazine. Yeah. So it was great. It was a little too late, but I don't know that it was the design that was too late because I can't remember when it was designed. No, because it can't even be that bad because you'd have the Lee magazine, which already was in existence a fair bit too, and that's essentially all it is. It's like a Lee magazine.
Yeah.
I think it's more the matter of it was the correct decision, and therefore everybody switched to that decision. If you look at it, you see that magazine system reemerge as just the flush magazine with plain follower that we see in a bajillion guns. It's just that they were built integral from the start. So in terms of concept, you took what was going to be the best idea for a magazine, a simple magazine, and you just made it sort of bolt-onable, and that was smart, but nobody really had the will to do it politically or financially before other factors kicked in, and they're like, well, hold on, if we have to make changes for smokeless, we should go ahead and make changes for a magazine while we're at it too. I think a lot of people are just sort of coasting and going, we're going to change everything just for that. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money to move the boat.
And once it became two things, they're like, oh crap, we got to
All right, let's take a pause with the cameras.
Okay. How much of Ribboy Royce's Sutter and Show Shots' homework did Garand copy?
Thank you. You put so many S's.
Yeah. How much is the Garand a copy of the RSC? I have no clue because I haven't actually worked up the Garand yet. I'm familiar with them, but to be honest with you, the Garand is not, from my external viewpoint, it's not the most remarkable system in terms of its engineering because you have a fairly well understood gas system at that time. So this gas system is, that's been around for a long time. The bolt locking mechanism is a rotating locking bolt, almost like a bolt action rifle. It's just using a guide rod to do that. And that sort of technology had been around in attempts to convert various rotating bolt mechanisms into semi-autos for a while. There's plenty of early developmental signs of that, although it's literally like a bolt action with a thing bolted on it.
Sure.
So I wouldn't call that all that unique. The trigger group is a hammer fire with a floated firing pin, so not that wild. I'm struggling to remember the structure of the trigger group, which is why I'm dying right now.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
It's very sheet metal-y in that regard. And I'm
I mean,
not
I
saying
remember
it is
the
sheet metal,
RSC's trigger group really because it's got those two prongs that then wiggle back and forth.
yes, which is actually, that is very much derived from the Browning autos. So
Right.
like the Auto 5 and the, oh, my brain just locked down. Model 7.
Sure.
So, sorry, my brain locked down so bad.
I'm like a crab over here.
Well, my problem is trying to picture dates and mechanisms at the same time. It's just two different parts of my brain. But the Garand has like chonky bits and then flat bits that reach around each other. And I'm just trying to picture it in my head. And I'm struggling, especially then trying to, like you just said with the RSC. I'm like, no, hold on, that ain't it. Mm-hmm. But he could also be talking more about the show shock because the same guy.
Right, same dude.
Right. I'd have to really look at the trigger group to be sure, but you know, a lot of the Garand isn't so much it's unique, and also, God, the Garand was a gas trap to begin with. That was weird too. Mm-hmm. A lot of the Garand is more just the being greater than the sum of its parts. Like you've correctly chosen the best features you could in that moment. The thing I like most about the Garand that's unique to the Garand is the end block system that is contained. So the auto-ejecting vertical end block is frankly brilliant, and also the implementation of it to use the minimum number of additional parts, the way it shares with that spring and everything, awesome. Mm-hmm. But I haven't actually sat down and done the development of the Garand. I haven't really looked at the trigger group, to be honest with you. So I'm not sure how similar they are or not now.
Are we waiting on something for the Garand before we do that episode?
I would like to, if anybody has... I doubt anybody has an original laying around, but they did make reproductions, and the number of guys actually put together really good reproductions of the gas trap Garands. I would really like to borrow one of the gas trap Garands to be able to do that episode the correct way. I think it'd be much nicer to show both versions and show that evolution as best we can. Almost like a half reproduction episode.
Okay, so if anyone has one, please be willing to lend.
So I'm sorry, I might not even be realizing exactly what he's telling me that he sees similar, but... to be honest with you, they probably both stole from common sources at some point.
Mm-hmm. What was Colt's deal during World War I? They got a bunch of foreign and new model government contracts, but they all seem to be able to deliver... What?
They seem to be able to deliver.
Yeah, was stuff already in production and only in that caliber.
This comes down to two factors. One... Colt would happily grab every contract that came their way because then they got the money. And
so is money first, worry about everything else later?
Well, it's a valid business strategy to say, look, just take the money. Now you have the money.
Now panic.
If you can't deliver and you have to refund the money.
Step one, take the money. Wait, we already made profit. What do we do now?
Well, no, it is a business approach. If you have the money and you later have to refund the money, at least you had the money for a while. And in an era where you could actually get interest on money,
there is a possibility you could have more money later, yes.
Yeah. We don't really have savings accounts anymore, but that was a thing then. So
think of the past.
Right. They could also say take somebody else's contract money and use it to fulfill an earlier contract, like a Ponzi scheme, and that would get them more pay too. It was just the step one, get the money. Okay, sure, we'll do it. So lying.
Crap.
The other thing is, don't forget these contracts would have writers is like, hey, I need this much gold down now, because I'm going to use that to build the facility to do the thing. And the market rate at the time was covered by that amount, but then you distort the market the minute you start building because you start drafting guys, or you start trying to hire guys.
Right.
And then everyone else is doing the same thing, so they're trying to hire guys. So then your cost of goods suddenly skyrockets more than you ever could have predicted because you don't know. It's a poker game. Yeah. You don't know how many people are playing the same card, you know? And so... until it's actually on the table.
It's all a gamble.
Right. So there's
it's a blind gamble.
That's the taking money side of it. And then in terms of delivery, it's just really friggin' hard to set up a new assembly line. And especially with all that competition around. So guess what they did more of? They did way more of, we'll keep doing the same thing. And then boom. We actually see this in the modern era. Around the Obama presidency, there was a big panic about ammunition. And everybody sold out ammo all over the place, right?
Yep.
And the ammo sold out so badly that a lot of military surplus cartridges that used to get made seasonally are still never made again.
Correct.
And people keep asking me, hey, where am I going to find that? It's like, they don't do that anymore.
Not for another 10 years, probably.
They're like, well, but they did it for 100 years. And you're like, yeah, and then they didn't. Because this is a factor that happens. You have only so many machines and men. what happens when you find out if I make exactly one thing all day, every day for 24 hours straight, as fast as I can make it? Mm-hmm. What if every time I make it, it's sold the minute I make it? Well, as a matter of fact, it's sold before I make it because it's got pre-orders. This is what happened with
for years.
In the American market, this happened with 5.56 and NATO in recent memory, right? Mm-hmm. Why would they ever stop and turn around and make another batch of Mauser? Because they have to shut down the money-making machine for, let's say they're really efficient and they can do it inside of 5 hours turnaround.
That's 5 hour times the loss. You don't need that.
That's 5 hours of $100,000 an hour. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. In order to make a cartridge that some old guys are going to want, but they're not pre-ordering it. And even if they did pre-order it, they're not pre-ordering it at some crazy premium that beats out.
Yeah, that evens out that time changeover.
Right. So you're going to want to have to, in order for them to stop making an insane number of NATO that they're pre-selling instantly on the same machine to make the Mauser, you're going to have to pay $40 a round. Because you have to, that turnaround time has to be eaten up by your batch of Mauser.
And even then, they're still probably not going to do it because it would still just take too much effort.
I mean, they would. No, if you manage to get enough investors together to say, hey, we're going to pay $40 a round, they go, okay, wait, mathematically, we could turn this machine off.
Because then it basically you'd have to earn enough, not just to cover it, but more.
And everybody always thinks about this, they're just like, well, I just want to pay for the time and the materials to do this. But what you're not paying for is the opportunity cost of not doing the other thing that was just making money.
Right.
And it's the same thing that happened to Colt. They had so much capacity, and the answer is we keep getting paid for the thing that we're already making. Make it.
That's
and
the
somebody
workhorse.
comes in and goes, hey, can we set this up? And they're like, give me your money. And it's just like, okay. And cool, we'll get to that in a minute. And they're still making money over here because they can just pay back that debt later.
Yeah.
And so it makes perfect sense from a business side of what's going on. It's just that on the consumer side or on the contract side, you're sort of going, but I don't understand material and time, right? And it's and opportunity. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that helps.
Is there any functional reason for the Luger trigger to be shaped as almost 3/4 of a circle?
This drives me nuts because I never figured out the answer to this.
No.
I have one theory, but it's really stupid.
Okay.
I wonder if some trigger failed to reset during testing. It's a spring reset. It's a spring reset.
Do you think the moon was filled a little more?
No, if your trigger return spring failed.
Okay.
On a normal semi-automatic trigger, if your trigger return spring fails, then the trigger is done for. You can't, you can't
pull it.
I mean, you can pinch it and pull it out, I guess, but Jesus,
Right.
Whereas the Luger, if you had a failed trigger return spring, you could just push forward on the trigger and then pull back and then push forward and pull back, and it would keep working like a repeating mechanical pistol.
I mean, I guess.
That's the only thing I can think of, but I haven't seen it written down anywhere, and I haven't had anybody give me a better explanation. Especially, I haven't had any primary source on why the heck they did it.
Oh, you did a whole lot of Luger research, not too long ago.
No, I might have missed it. It might be somewhere in the paperwork, and I just didn't see it, but I do not know off the top of my head.
Okay. Which part of the guns that went through your hands, the actual piece rather than the model in general, do you suspect caused the most casualties?
So this question, reading it, essentially is which gun that we've handled has that particular gun with that serial number, that gun has killed the most people, which is a question.
Oh, yeah, the actual pieces rather than the model in general. Oh, okay,
right.
So literally.
So he's not talking about so we handled a MG08, so that's a big machine gun, so that might have killed a lot of people. Excuse me, Pete. This pollen season is killing me.
It is, I know, I'm sorry. It's okay, I've been drinking Red Bull this whole time.
He's asking, and I see this a lot with collectors, they tend to be like, I wonder how many people this has killed. And I've just never really had that perspective because most firearms kind of sit in inventory. And then the ones that do make it to the front, it's even in the Great War, a minority of arms end up on the front line, believe it or not. There's a lot of them there, but they're in the minority of the ones made. And then even when they're on the front line, a minority of them actually fire. And then even of the minority that fire, a minority of those get killed or kills. So out of everything we handled, is it possible there's some blood on some of them in the way that you're describing? Yes, but I'm going to guess 3. You know what I mean? Out of hundreds of guns, I'm going to guess 3. Because I bet you the numbers are way lower than you'd ever imagine. And to be honest with you, I'm not hung up about it because I'm not.
And there's no one marks them or anything like that as if with the kills. I mean, maybe them personally.
First of all, even if they did, it's 9 times out of 10, it's Bubba chasing a buck. Like, I get all these guys like, it's got kill marks. I'm going, yeah, okay, so somebody shot 3 deer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that's who marks it.
Because that's what Peepaw did.
Right.
Yeah, he got real proud.
Soldiers don't gouge their rifles. They get yelled at for that. But
they do. They did.
Yeah. So, also, most people, frankly, don't glory in it, so they're not going to mark it anyway.
True.
Anyway, so I don't know.
No clue. Can you shoot 7.5 millimeter Swiss revolver, the M1882 ammo with its Swedish counterpart, the M1887?
Well, this is an argument of can versus should.
It can fit, but
if it'll fit and you can pull the trigger, yeah, you can.
Technically.
And those cartridges are very close to interchangeable. Mm-hmm. I suspect that they will fire fine from each other. The problem I have is I'd have to sit down and look at the episodes now. My problem would be, I can't recall which of them was jacketed and which wasn't, and what their actual nominal bore diameter versus the bullet diameter is. Mm-hmm. But that's where you start to get into a situation where it's like, okay, you can fire it, nothing bad happened. Now I'm going to fire it 50 more times. See, nothing bad happened. What you don't necessarily know is, are you eroding the crap out of your barrel? So I've seen this. We had a Gewehr 98 that we turned up that was never rebarreled for the Spitzer cartridge, which does have a jump up in diameter.
Right.
And so that thing had flat rifling and was still, after 5 rounds, the barrel was smoking hot because it's the wrong bore. And so being a 98, it fired probably thousands of rounds from somebody with the wrong ammo, but it nuked that barrel. Yep. So on these revolvers, unfortunately, the data is so low on the individual cartridges. We kind of struggled with these ones a little bit to get the individual marks of cartridges and the slight differences between them. You're probably looking at a thing where it's probably safe enough, but then you might be looking at erosion if you're not careful. That's as best I could tell you.
Fair. All right, let's do more, then we'll take a pause. You've done a number of episodes on pocket pistols that were pressed in the military service. What I wonder is, how were they originally designed to be carried? Like chamber ready, or in a holster, or with the hammer? How were they supposed to, in what state were they supposed to be in?
Mostly they were designed to go in your pocket. The original holsters do not seem to have been marketed for these things. They were available depending on who you... It almost feels like the retailers were the ones that sold the holsters in most cases.
And then wouldn't you see the holsters on officers and stuff like that?
Yes, a lot of officers would buy these things, but we actually see the armies making holsters for these things because there weren't holsters available in the commercial market.
Sure.
Because you're supposed to shove it into your pocket. The fact that they have manual safeties means that there was some intention of them being carried in chamber ready.
This is why men have deep pockets.
Yeah, so you can throw your pistols in there.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I think your average person, it seems like, just from what I'm accustomed to dealing with people, your average person seems to want to carry chamber empty. I suspect a lot of people carried chamber empty back then. However, the fact that you have a manual safety means that you are intending to carry chamber hot. So by design, they are capable of being carried chamber hot and in the pocket. Which sounds bad, but that's what they were trying to do.
All right, let's take a pause for the cameras.
All right.
All right. Now that you know so much more about guns, is there an aspect that matches that low IQ, mid IQ, high IQ horseshoe meme?
Do you know this meme?
Yeah.
It's like the midwit meme.
I know. Something that you believed before researching, changed your opinion on as you learned more, but eventually went back to the original belief now that you're an expert.
Okay, go. Do you have one? You already read my thing, didn't you?
I did, but I can't remember that one specifically being necessarily... I don't remember there were a point in which you were into your
maybe not
starting
me personally,
your
but the zeitgeist, I guess, is my example. But I was trying to see if there's anything that you felt like you had an immediate reaction to. You sort of dismissed that reaction, and then later you thought about it more, and you came back to it.
I can't think. I'll think on one. You talk about yours thing.
I think it's the Mosin.
Yeah.
Because you hear, the garbage rod, and as a collector, it's my first gun I got, And I shot it around, and I was like, it's not that bad. I can shoot things and hit things. And then I picked up other Milsurp, and I went, it's really not that bad compared to other Milsurp. It holds 5. The bolt's a little stickier, but that's okay. And if I clean it up and I take just good, if I breathe on it just right, it behaves like a good boy. He's a good boy, right? And then I go to do the whole research for the episode, and I've gotten to this point where I'm like, actually, the Mosin's fine. It's a little heavy, it's a little clunky, but It's fine. It's fine. Then I do the episode, and I'm just like, oh my God, why did they do it this way? Like, they're just good. Okay, we need a lapel barrel. Done. Now what? Now we need a single shot bolt action rifle. Do we want a magazine? We'll worry about that later.
Okay.
Should we maybe integrate the design into... No. Okay. We're just gonna... Okay, so we made a front locking bolt. Okay. Hey, it can rotate out a battery. Okay, bolt a thing onto that. What if we just make it in here? No, bolt a thing onto it. Okay, so we've taken a Hotchkiss bolt and we stuck a stupid collar on it to keep it from rotating out a battery. And then now the whole thing is like it's binding because there's too many moving surfaces. That's to open up the tolerances some. Okay, now it feels like a rubber band. Perfect. And then we'll think about adding a magazine. Like, I'm sorry, it's the worst way to design a gun. It's a completely linear, one point at a time committee design that had no holistic. It is the antithesis of John Moses Browning, and it shows.
Sure. Was it the Swiss 78 or was it the 82 that had those horrible grips? I can't remember now.
Oh, the Swiss 82?
Okay, so here that was mine because I thought of it for a second. I was like,
okay.
Because we got to the point where we've been doing all these weird revolvers. Your butt okay?
No, it's like I'm sitting in the chair, my tailbone's starting to hurt.
We're going to have to eventually get up here in a minute and take a break. Okay, so the 82, I'd already gotten to the point where I'd shot enough old revolvers for the series we were doing, and I went, oh God, I'm really not into these revolvers. And then I got to that one. I went, oh, this feels great in my hand. It feels amazing. Okay, maybe this one will be all right. And then I go to shoot it, and those ruts dig into my palm every shot. And I went, nope, never mind. It's shit. They're all shit. They all hate me. So that was one for me.
Okay. What you got then?
Were black powder shells kept and reloaded in the Old West?
Yeah. I mean, not by everybody. I mean, a lot of people were probably very wasteful, but they had reloading tools. You actually see it mentioned. It's interesting. That's a handover from the muzzle loading days. Because once you get accustomed to assembling your cartridge in the gun, a lot of people would just assemble their cartridges in the West. Like, cartridges being sold as a whole contained unit was not always the way it went, especially with shotguns. You would order supplies, and then a lot of people were very thrifty, and brass was brass, so they would load, they had reformers and everything. They looked different. A lot of them were like hand tool style now. Have you seen them?
Yeah.
Because they didn't necessarily have the grip strength thing. I swear to God.
Oh, yeah.
Because instead of, what if we mounted on a table? Who the hell's got a table? Just give me a weird nutcracker that makes ammo.
Jimmy needed to be able to have the hand strength of a gorilla because that's how he survived. Anyone that didn't have Jimmy's hand strength, they died. There was a good chance they didn't make it.
Oh, man.
All right, next one. In your World War I episodes about stripper clip loading pistols, you don't really go over whether or not it's an easy process to load single rounds without the stripper clip. Can these pistols be topped up one round at a time easily like it's a revolver? That can depend on the gun.
Yeah, C&A6? No.
No.
Weirdly, Mannlicher 1905, no.
Steyr-Hahn, no.
The problem you're going to run into is all of them are designed to free the slide when
the follower
right. They're all
depressed.
designed to have a system in which they lock open up until the follower is depressed, or if they're smarter, they'll have a system that locks them open until you unlock them. But then the system that locks them open is activated by the follower rising up or cartridge rising up.
It was just a really easy way to get that linked up, and it's like, oh, great, we'll just use the follower. Done.
Right.
Why would they ever need to top this up?
Yeah, they don't think it that way.
No.
And then so the problem is, as long as there's a loaded round as long as there's a round in the magazine next, the system will not lock open unless you manually lock it open. So the most forgiving of these would probably be the Steyr-Hahn, in which they had a flip up safety that worked with the slide back. I believe the Steyr-Hahn had that, if I'm recalling correctly. Yes, it did.
Yeah, it had that hook that you could flip up to hold the slide.
So you could top up a Steyr-Hahn easier than others.
Although, I don't think you could do it when the slide was back. I think you just did it while the slide was forward.
No, you can do it with the slide back.
Can you?
Yes.
Oh, I thought they had something in there that was preventing it from moving.
No, I have to double check. You guys are gaslighting me. I actually haven't picked up a Steyr-Hahn in 2 years, so... I swear you can lock it open with the hook, though. But most of them you can't. Okay. Like C&A6, definitely not. That thing's a monster.
Yeah, no. Let's say get Grand Thumb. Let's see here. There we are. How is provenance determined, maybe not completely, but likely for a certain firearm?
So what a certain firearm did.
Yeah.
It's primary source
Just
documents
records?
that have
Yeah.
with serial numbers. I mean, that's it.
Order
So
numbers. Yeah.
you can get sales records from certain manufacturers that still have their records in existence that have usually been bought out by private concerns that will sell you that data.
Yep.
If it was any sort of military service, you would have to look through the archives of that country's military and hope that there was some document that contained a serial number. Sometimes they're very clear about where serial lots went for different troops.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not.
Correct.
On rare occasion, you'll get lucky and it's a country that actually unit marks their firearms. And so you can find that. You can find the unit markings and that would give you the unit at least.
Yep.
But that's really about it. I get a lot of people that I tend to get a lot of emails of people going, I have, Mosin
X
Nagant.
gun with this
I
serial.
unironically get I have Carcano or Mosin Nagant serial number or whatever. Who had it? And I'm going,
I don't know.
I don't
You
think they even
apparently
wrote-
have it.
It's like, yeah, you do now. That's the one person. As a matter of fact, up until this point in history, this is probably the first time anybody wrote down.
Now, unless it was
who's-
something like maybe the Swiss K-31s under the butt plate, occasionally those would have the soldier's name that
That's true.
carried it.
The gun itself can tell you, but if it can't tell you, then you're going to have to find that paper with the serial.
Now, it's not that common. That's like 1 in 5. I happen to pull a butt plate off of one of those K-31s and be like, ooh, this one's got it.
The U.S. has a fair bit of continuous data, and for some reason, I believe it was the trapdoors. They were pretty good about actually keeping serial records with the soldier.
Okay.
So those sometimes people get. I think that's where it kind of comes from. People are like, well, that guy got all that data about what venereal disease that guy had when he had that rifle. So how about this Mosin? You're like, brother, there's been a lot of government since then.
Your guess on venereal diseases is as good as my guess on them.
If they wrote it down when they handed it to him, it went through I don't know how many governments and revolutions. So.
Having covered firearms from over 100 years now, what do you feel is the largest individual technological leap that happened in that time? I mean,
It depends on which 100 years we're talking about.
I think
If we're talking about
they were talking about when we were doing the Great War series.
from over 100 years now, yeah, but no, because the way he's wording it sounds more like he's talking about all the way from the 1840s, which we've covered, to the 1940s, because that's actually the period we've covered.
True.
And I would say smokeless powder is ranked up there pretty high,
That was a pretty big jump.
but it's got just breech loading metallic cartridge is also very high. It's hard to ignore either because both of them work together so well to get what we consider the modern firearm. Without a smokeless powder, I don't know that. I have to say breech loading metallic cartridge is probably the biggest jump because it is a definite decision. It is how do we have a breech loader? Because they wanted breech loading. They knew that was the thing they wanted.
Yeah.
But how do you have a breech loader that is sealed and rapidly reloadable? So metallic cartridge is a big one.
That probably is the biggest jump if you think about it, because you go from literally loose bits to all of it there together.
Right. And you have to actually invent that. You're inventing
A container.
a casing and the metallurgy to do that. I think it's got to be the metallic cartridge.
And you're having to change some existing rifle probably into something that can handle that.
Right. But it's really just that we're talking about a clear invention. Metallic cartridge is probably the biggest one. Smokeless powder is very interesting because smokeless powder isn't really an invention, which is going to upset people. It's more of a fast forward button. From what I understand about the development of smokeless powder, it's that not LaBelle, I almost said LaBelle. VA developed a method for essentially graphing the detonation of a powder. Okay, we think of powder as ignite, go boom, and then if you imagine it as a shock wave, you just go 0 to this much and then go back down, right?
Yeah.
But that's not how it was. In the detonation of the powder, or in the burning and then the pressurization of the powder and the way it kind of jumps up and everything.
Sure.
There was the explosion, although people don't like that term. Measuring that the chamber pressure and the peaks and stuff. He was able to get a read over time in a very little nano moment, right? He manages to get this read on what it's doing. And once he does that, he can change the ingredients around to adjust the front or the back or the whatever. He suddenly is able to do what would have taken a century to do inside of a month. He can suddenly make instead of guessing, he's making directed changes.
Sure.
So he rapidly develops smokeless powders, and then everybody else rapidly develops them shortly thereafter, because while France is busy protecting the powder, frankly, it looks like they didn't go far enough to protect the equipment, because the testing equipment is really what it is, you know? And then from there, we see a lot of different smokeless powders being tried out for a while, because suddenly everybody can sort of see what they couldn't see before. He opened the veil, you know?
Right. So suddenly everyone could see behind.
Right. So smokeless powder was probably inevitable. It just was going to take a lot longer to get there without the technology
But now
to
everyone
observe it.
can see there's a damn wizard in there.
Right. So I think a measuring tool gets a smokeless powder, whereas metallic cartridge is an invention in and of itself. So I'll probably hedge towards metallic cartridge.
Fair. Is smokeless powder a bigger game changer than rapid reloading?
I think you kind of need
Smokeless
powder to do rapid
Yeah,
reloading.
I feel like.
I mean, it's not impossible. I guess it's not impossible, but the question is, what's your value on volume of fire versus repeatability of fire? Because if you had to run black powder, think of it in terms of artillery. Like, you could technically make a repeating mechanism the same, be it smokeless or black powder, like a recoiling carriage artillery in World War I, right? The problem you're going to have is, how many rounds can you really get out before you have to tear that thing down and clean it all the way out?
Yeah, you got to take it off the line, put one in its place, and then clean that one.
I guess the problem is, you say rapid reload, but rapid reload is a bunch of different technologies that happen here and here and here and here to try to get the best they can for feeding rounds. So I guess the concept of being able to reload rapidly is more important than the concept of clean powder. But
the fouling that the clean powder, prevents.
Yeah, it's like one enables the other to be far more efficient. They're more
right.
I don't know.
So your rapid reloading mechanism may change if there was smokeless or smoke instead, because then you'd have to worry about the fouling. You'd have to adjust. Well, this thing turns out can't handle all these fine pieces moving around. We got to make this a bit, more sturdy.
Right, but I will say, if you stop and think about it, like, if you were to have black powder repeating rifles up against smokeless single shots, you're probably going to want to be on the black powder repeating rifle side, I guess, unless you're sniping and you don't want to reveal your position and you want to shoot really far away. It's a hard call, but I guess the repeating as a concept is bigger, but it's not really a one invention thing.
Fair. Well, let's do one more and we'll take a pause.
Okay.
Is there a non-Great War single action, such as the Colt single action army,
which is the one they always want it to be,
that you would rank higher than the worst double actions of the war, i.e. the Romanian 1915, the Gasser, whatever it may be?
I'm going to say something controversial. Single action army is not that reliable over revolver. So whenever somebody gives me a single action example, they'll be like, yeah, okay, single actions are bad, but what about the Colt single action? And you're like, it's not that reliable, guys. It's got this double tine spring that, it's simple enough, but it actually could be a lot simpler for what it is. It's fairly dumb revolver in terms of it being an 1840s design that just kept going and got converted to, they added a top strap, which Remington had forever.
So non-Great War could be both before and after then.
The point is there a single action that would rank higher than even the worst double action revolver?
Yeah.
And so the answer to this is the Romanian 1915 as contracted from Spain, that little Piper clone.
Oh, yeah.
That's the worst one. So that's an 8mm.
A screw on top of the barrel.
We actually have, but we said this in an episode though. There was it's an 8mm 6-shot, I believe, with a barrel that has to be set by a set screw because it's so poorly made. And it's inaccurate. It's likely to break after like 50 rounds.
We shot it a few times and it'd never been shot since.
Yeah. Can you name a single action that you would take over that?
Well,
I'm assuming we're talking about for, well, no, it wouldn't even matter Great War or not. Let me lay it to you this way.
Okay.
If you're using a handgun in military defense, it is a very close target that is an immediate threat, and you're probably with other people. You're probably not alone. So you're probably hoping to get one guy, maybe two if you have to. And that's really what it's for.
Was the Webley-Fosbury, was that 1901?
Yeah, the Webley-Fosbury is a single action in the sense that it's a recoiling revolver.
Technically.
Yeah, so you could technically put a Webley-Fosbury over
the
Romanian-ish. That I would probably do that. But then he's going to say that's a cheat because it's a semi-automatic.
Well, he didn't specify.
It is single action, though.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with no, to be honest with you. I can't. The problem for me is when you have an immediate threat and there's a single action revolver, you're lucky to get 2 shots off. Mm-hmm. Lucky to get 2. Whereas even that little shitty 8mm, I can just go, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I could empty that cylinder so much faster in a panic. And I know you're going to say, well, so-and-so is the fastest guy in the world at whatever. And it's like, yeah, okay, good. So he spent over 1,000 hours learning to operate one handgun. Uh-huh. And I would rather put that time into preparing to not be cornered. You know what I mean?
Sounds better.
I think sometimes the utility of something... look, if that's the case, then you must hate airbags and analog brakes. Because it's like, the mechanism is doing the work for us. The work is you point, you pull. Mm-hmm. And then don't think about it otherwise. Yep. And double action is really important in that regard.
I think so too. All right, let's take a pause for the camera. All right, next one. Any guess how many rounds an actual Great War service rifle would have seen during its service?
We kind of talked about this in a weird way.
We did before. Yeah.
I actually don't know, because if they were used for training, a lot. Mm-hmm. If they were frontliners, actually weirdly probably a lot, because there's a lot of just sort of firing.
Right. As suppressive fire, essentially. Even if it's not really, even if you're aiming at somebody, it can be suppressive.
Yeah, or just for effect or whatever. But
and there's a lot that didn't see service at all.
I would be kind of amazed if it was over 1,000, though. I will say, even with all that, I'd be pretty amazed at the average. Well, actually, hold on, wait. A Great War service rifle, the average is probably like 500 or something lower than we're really thinking.
Oh yeah,
because most of them didn't go to the line like we were talking about. But now I'm thinking like a frontline rifle, and I'm going, I don't know, maybe 1,000. It's probably not as much as we're thinking at all, though. We read an account of a machine gun team that had a backup lever action shotgun they bought in a pawn shop, and they were carrying around just like Berdan buckshot, essentially. Oh, it was bore shot because they bought in Europe. Mm-hmm. And they were just carrying around handfuls of it that they occasionally get when they were behind the lines. They must not have been firing it that often, but they still talked about, using it at night to, if they heard a weird noise, they'd slap the wire with it. And I'm going, okay, so they're talking about shooting it, and it's clearly they're using like 12 rounds a month or something. It's not a lot. So,
meh, it depends.
Machine guns, however, though.
Oh yeah, a lot. Okay, next question. How does the Lee Navy clip system work? Lee Navy clip system work? Okay.
Yes, the closest thing I managed to find, blah, blah, blah. So he talks about where he's seen videos of this thing, but nobody really explains it to him.
Yes.
And that's because when you load a straight pull Lee Navy, well, they say it's straight pull. I have arguments about whether I think it's like a rocking pull.
Yeah.
So when you load the Lee Navy, you insert your stripper clip, and then a lot of people think it's when you chamber the first round, the clip falls out, but that's more likely that's just the first time it might fall out. When you load one, it unlocks, the clip is like locked, and then it unlocks and it frees the rounds. And then it's loose the minute it's fully inserted.
Now, so basically, once the final round pushes in with it, it's loose.
No, it's not about the final rounds. It's about how deep the clip has to go. There's a thing in the shape of the magazine well that flips the lock on the clip, because it has a rotating lock in the clip. Oh. Good thing if you're having a hard time understanding this, don't worry about it, because we actually have Tenacious Trilobite, a friend of ours, and I sent him a message, and he agreed to record the following clip. So now there's a mini episode.
So the first thing I'm going to look at is our clip body. It just kind of looks like a regular stripper clip body. Got a patent date on the back. Maybe it looks like it's missing a spring in the middle. Then our other piece is this wire here. And the key part you want to notice is these kind of hooked ends here. And then in the middle, it kind of bends into a hooked tab. So that hooked tab goes down into our slot in the clip body, like that. And then at rest, it's going to lay down those hooks flat to the sides. And your back tab's going to look like that. Then you just go ahead and stick your rounds in. These are dummies. Then once you have that centered, you can just flip this tab down. And doing that will pop these hooks around and kind of hook around the edges of the rounds to hold that together. It seems like it'd be flimsy, but it seems to work pretty well overall. And we'll set that aside for a second. If you flip the rifle over, the first thing you notice is this big hole in the bottom. You'll see a lot of auction listings or sales of these rifles say they're missing a floor plate or a magazine. This is actually intentional. It's supposed to be that way. If you flip it over and open the action, you'll see this crazy thing, floating extractor. And you'll also see that it doesn't have any feed lips in there. You got a follower here. So the rounds are actually held down by the extractor as it's sliding back and forth with the action open. And then when the action's closed, obviously the bolt body itself holds the rounds down in the magazine. And let's see if I can get some cross lighting on it. So right in there, you'll see kind of a mountain shape. And then below it in the action, you'll see kind of a square cutout with a scoop in it. That geometry is made so that as you stick the clip down into the gun, it'll take that tab on the backside and flip it over and release the rounds. And I'll try to get you a view of that. Take our whole system there. Notice our wire hook there is facing that way. And then as we push it into the rifle, push it past. Did you see it pop over there? Right in there. Our wire flipped out from here to there. And that actually decoupled the rounds from the clip. So a lot of people say these eject the clip after you chamber the first round, but really the clip it's not positively ejected, it's just released. And it's already released now that the clip's been pushed into the action. These dummies don't tend to cycle very well, but I'll give it a shot. So the clip is still inside for now, and it's only being held by friction between the rounds and the clip body. Usually after the recoil of a first round or maybe the second round, it'll pop out. There we go. Jostling in that second round and chambering it made it drop out the bottom. And then to unload it, you kind of got to hold the extractor to the side and jimmy your rounds out. You can single load this. It's very finicky. The magazine's very wide. It was really intended to be used with clips, and that's the way they would have used it in military service. So kind of a neat system. I can see why they got rid of it. It really needed some refinement. Hopefully that all made sense. I'll go ahead and hand you back to the bearded one and the other one.
There, was that a lot clearer?
I like to think it was, yes. Thank you, Tenacious Trilobite.
It's the best you can do without one of Bruno's animations.
That was still pretty dang good, so thanks, man.
I think he's going to lend us that at some point, so we'll get a whole episode.
Nice. He has been threatening to lend that to us for quite some time.
Yeah, I know.
All right, next question. You have done a great job in several specials explaining which do you believe to be the best pistol, revolver, rifle. But which of the many single-shot rifles have you covered that you regard to be the best?
So we've actually considered this because, was it Bloke who started this? The timed, maybe it's Rob. I think it's Rob and then Bloke picked up on it.
You're just getting all the foreign guys confused, aren't you?
British muzzleloaders and Bloke on the Range both have participated in, I can't remember who started it now. Sort of like a time trial for repeatable fire on single-shot rifles.
Sure.
And we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but I made a list. I actually sat down and made a list of single-shot rifles, or at least single-shot systems, because there are a lot that are along the lines of the trapdoor that just have flip-over latches.
Yeah.
That are marginally different from each other. Mm-hmm. But we haven't gotten everything in, essentially. We have not handled every single-shot firearm that we would need to make this decision very well.
Yeah, what would you call to be the best, too? Would it be the most robust, or would it be the faster?
I don't know. So this is, it depends. If you're a country, it's going to be whatever's the cheapest but still efficient enough to do what you're doing.
So rolling blocks, those were pretty big.
Yeah, excellent. Rolling block, very excellent. But a rolling block's not the best in terms of handling or rapidity of fire.
True.
Rapidity of fire would be something like the Mauser 71.
Yeah, 71. Yeah.
Or like a Gra. Mm-hmm. So
depends on what you think of that you'd categorize as the best. But again, we haven't handled everything yet.
I lean towards bolt action, repeating single shots. Mm-hmm. I weirdly lean towards the Berdan too.
Interesting. Why?
Because it's poorly understood in the U.S. and most people who reload for it don't cut the bevel like they should, and that's why it has extraction problems. And
I remember us having that problem.
And they're usually when we get them in, they're in terrible shape because the best of them they've been through Russia, you know?
Yeah.
But when you go back and look at the numbers, the Berdan 2 had a really good cartridge.
Yeah.
Like a really good cartridge. And that's sort of the thing is when you're talking about a single shot rifle, that's sort of where the cartridge accuracy, precision, range, all that kind of kicks in on a single shot black powder. But even so, if the field's open and we're not just talking about a gun that should have existed at its time, there was a Mauser 71 rebarrel done in Uruguay to it was a 6.5 Dauda Toe cartridge. But it was done way into the era of repeating rifles. So it was obsolete the moment it was adopted.
Okay.
But if we're just saying, look, out of all this, if we're all going to have a fight with single shot rifles and it's today, I'd probably pick that little bastard because it's going to have a smokeless, high velocity single shot cartridge that's going to do some real damage. So I think the question needs more parameters is the short answer. But I tend to favor bolt action single shots because they tend to be rapid and you just slap it in there and go.
That's true. All right, let's see here. Related to the relatively known Citadel Martinis that were reworked in Cairo, do you know anything about the Martinis that were reworked in Khartoum or know of any books, resources that discuss them? He had a little note here. Okay.
I do not off the top of my head, and this is one of those questions that's so specific you should probably email me. Because the best I can do is kind of flag it, and when I have 10 minutes to follow up, I can, but we don't have... That wasn't the angle that we took on our episode, and we don't have plans to do that angle for quite some time. And so it's very niche, and the authors that you're looking for are probably still alive that would be able to point you in the right direction.
That's true.
Oh, God. Neil Aspenshaw just wrote his book. I guarantee you he would know who to talk to. He's a man who you can literally look up his email. There is... I can't think of his name all of a sudden. It's completely flipped my mind and it's going to drive me crazy.
Yeah.
But he had a publication for years out of Australia, and I can't recall it now. Oh, it's going to hurt me. Anyway, there's some gentlemen out there that have this stuff where there's probably been notes stacked up a little bit at a time by various people trying to figure it out. And a lot of it probably is not as available on the forums as you'd like it to be.
Yeah.
But the forums, or if you have to email me, will probably tell you who to ask. And for anybody that has a question like this, where it's so narrow that it's going to take me like half a day to dig into it, the question to start asking is who to ask. And then ask as many of those people as possible and be willing to follow up with your own homework is the short answer.
All right, next question. I'd like to make a smoothbore 22 LR side-by-side as a beginner's gunsmithing project. Do you have any suggestions where to find examples of applicable lockwork?
Generally, if it's going to be a side-by-side that needs to be simple in construction, most people opt for a box lock. And the fathers of that would be Anson and Dealey. So if you want to look up Anson and Dealey and box lock firearms, if you're looking for drawings to help you out or anything to kind of give you inspiration, weirdly, like I think where I would start, and I can't guarantee anything, would be like books.google.com and set a date limit to like the 1920s and everything before, and start looking up box lock, box space lock, Anson Dealey.
Not familiar with the box lock.
You are. It's actually very common in a lot of firearms.
Oh,
it's,
okay.
Not unlike the single shot that we have when we did the Philippine Constabulary Remington.
Oh, really?
It's not. It's like a double barrel-ish version of that. It has a tab that goes under and it locks.
The box lock. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So
I know what you're talking about now.
that family of firearms has many iterations and patents around it. If you started looking for them in the old stuff, because it's weird, they used to talk more about shotgun lock work back in the day, and then once it kind of settled into a pattern, it just turned into, well, is it a box lock or a side lock? And that's all they mention, even though there's lots of nuance in there. But they used to talk about it. And so the older magazine articles and stuff tend to have that stuff. And once you start looking, you'll find other terms that you can then look in the same date range, and you'll see. It'll start appearing for you. And you may even find some drawings in there.
All right, next question. Do you think 276 Pedersen was enough of an improvement over 30-06 to justify its adoption for just the M1 rifle?
No, probably not.
No, the ammo didn't work out so great.
Well, no, having mixed ammo doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, Pedersen's a cool cartridge in a lot of ways, but Mixed ammo is a mess. Technically, the scale that the U.S. got to in World War II, it could handle something like that. Technically, but it would have had to assign men and eyes and attention span to it. It was enough that I think it was brave enough of the U.S. to use 30 carbine, and even that, I think I really got to do more World War II homework. I might make people mad, but I wonder how much of a mistake that might have been. Mm-hmm. It's hard to call something a mistake when everybody comes out the victor on the other side.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm really concerned with how many logistical hours go into having mixed ammunition in the front.
That'll be an interesting episode series.
I was also never thought about it. I don't think I've ever tried to see what would happen if you try to shove one in the chamber of the other. Is there any way to actually mess it up? Because infantry will do that crap.
They will.
Like, they'll do all sorts
fits,
of stupid crap. Yeah. I do not think it was worth it, especially because I just don't... After World War II, we really moved towards intermediate cartridges and shorter barrel lengths and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Pedersen could preclude that to some degree, but like, I don't know that either of those cartridges is the ideal cartridge at that time for that conflict. And so then you would have made all that investment for not having the ideal anyway. And it turns out you got it done with what you had. You know? There's also a war that was much more equipment involved. Let's
do another one. Is the Ruger GP100 also a Fanyu descendant, or does it come from somewhere else? I'm familiar with the Ruger GP.
Yeah, this is another one where I had to look up the drawings.
Look that up real quick.
Good luck. It's kind of wild.
Oh, that's good.
It uses a coil mainspring and has no rebounding arm. As a matter of fact, from the isometric drawing, I couldn't figure out how it rebounds. I don't have one here to look at. I'm not sure what it's doing. I think it might have a slide-up hammer block that's serving as the rebounder. You use the word diagram, but it ain't going to help you much.
Okay, good to know.
I really wish I had had a flat diagram of it or something. I tried looking up like a video. Somebody had an animation, but the animation didn't actually have anything in it. See, there's no actual...
Oh,
yeah, it's telling you
that's
nothing.
Not very helpful. Okay.
I'd have to get my hands on one, but short answer is definitely not Fanyu because it does not have Fanyu's rebounding arm. Like we said with the Smith & Wessons, they're definitely not Fanyu's because, well, the ones we were talking about don't have the rebounding arm, which is really what was Fanyu. Mm-hmm. It does, however, have the core hammer nose / direct sear contact, which we now believe was first done by a man named Fagard. Mm-hmm. So...
Fanyu and Fagard.
Yeah, it's really fun in the English language, but it is like a single action sear / nose operated revolver like most are, but it doesn't seem to be a Fanyu derived one necessarily.
Okay. Let's do one more, then we'll take a pause. In your rifle research of World War I, was there any thought taken into sniper use from the early stage of development of a particular rifle, or was it just limited to doctrine development and training?
So pre-World War I, I've only noticed one country in my reading that very obsessively tried to design a rifle around an optic. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't say that they designed it around the optic. It's like they had a DMR program. You know, they had a sniper program, let's call it. Mm-hmm. They wanted to make the most accurate long-range shooting rifle they could. They wanted, as part of that, they were playing with diopters, they were playing with optics, they were playing with everything.
Sure.
And so the gun was in many stages paired with glass. And then they back and forth.
Yeah.
And weirdly, the only gun I know of that did that is the Norwegian 1912 carbine, because that gun wasn't supposed to be a carbine. It was supposed to be a universal short rifle with a reinforced receiver. And at some levels, they tried to make it optics ready, and then that whole program fell apart because at that time, the glass couldn't keep up with what they were endeavoring to do.
Sure.
Because they were insane enough to say, well, should the infantry have optics? You know, they weren't really going to do that, but they were thinking about it, or they were thinking about having DMRs at whatever level, you know, and which is very advanced thinking. But the ruggedness of the equipment was just not there. Being able to set up the zero with the existing equipment was not there. And of course, the 1912 is just a bulked up Krag Jorgensen. So the gun itself was not designed for an optic either. It's just that sub model was considered towards an optic and then broke away from it and then kind of, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's the best I can think of. But you should watch our Krag 19 if you haven't watched the Norwegian Krag carbine episodes, it's pretty wild. But the shortest possible story is the 1912 Krag Jorgensen was an attempted universal short rifle that was accurized. And then there wasn't enough money to re-equip all the infantry. So they held on to their baby project by rolling it into the need for universal carbines for specialty troops, which put you in this weird situation where your infantry had an inferior rifle to your specialty troops who had an actual stronger, more accurate rifle.
Yeah.
But it was shorter, so that's why they got it, because it was short, even though it was more accurate while being shorter, which is just so funny to me. Anyway.
All right, let's take a pause for the cameras. All right, next question. What is the best and or most interesting example of a firearm appendix you have encountered? A gun part or function that was once considered important and is still included in many modern guns despite no longer or never serving much purpose.
I don't know, what are we saying by modern? I don't know if he just means, smokeless powder style stuff or like modern.
Yeah, what is...
Because I can't think...
That's a good question.
I'm actually struggling now. He's making me think that there's some appendix he's noticed in modern guns, but most modern guns do not have...
appendix quotes.
Yeah, they don't have stuff on them that doesn't... It's weird. We often say there's no such thing as a cut for no reason on a firearm, although in the modern world...
Now that's different. Now the cuts can be there just because they
decorative.
are... Yeah.
There's decorative cuts all over modern firearms. It's weird to me.
But back then, not so much. Every cut, there was a good reason.
I was watching an engineer friend of mine work on a design, and he's just like, I just puts in a panel. I was like, "Oh, you're trying to lighten it up?" And he goes, "It just looks weird flat." I was like, it gave me an aneurysm.
It hurts.
Yeah. So the most useless thing that ever was in a firearm was probably the blish lock. I mean, everybody knows about that. I always find revolver manual safeties to be laughable.
Oh yeah, they're always weird.
And they stuck around for a long time. Mm-hmm. And you're going, the double action pull on that is so wild.
Yeah.
And we still kind of see it. You still see weird, you'll occasionally still see grip safeties and stuff for revolvers, although I don't think modern does it, but definitely in the early 1900s, you see a lot of that.
Yeah. We are hungry. We're going to have to take another take.
I know, I'm gurgling it. So the other one is inertial locks and shotguns stuck around for a while, but thankfully the Great War sort of broke that up. Inertial locks and shotguns were a system in which they were deathly afraid of hang fires because they happened way too often in pump action shotguns. Everybody's all like, "Oh, you can slam fire, Mm-hmm. Yes. But if you stop and imagine when you could slam fire a shotgun, if you had a hang fire, which means the cartridge detonates a second after it should,
then you'd be already pumping back.
You go click, and it'd be halfway out the chamber, and it'd go boom, and it was a nightmare. So, and that was very common because early smokeless powders were hydroscopic, so they would waterlog pretty easily, and therefore they would like ignite and then warm up, and then actually, and so early shotgun history, especially pump action shotguns, were timed like right when especially Americans are like, "Oh boy, pump action shotguns, we love these things." It was right when that smokeless shotgun ammo wasn't doing so hot, and it was a bad combo.
I can imagine.
Everybody talks about the Winchester 97 from the point of the Winchester 93, but really they talk about, oh, he needs to have the button, they reinforce the receiver or whatever. The big difference between those two guns is actually the inclusion of an inertial lock. Which most people aren't even aware of on the 97, but you have to pump forward a little bit before you pump back.
Yes.
So when you fire it, the recoil causes you to kind of do that anyway, and then you never notice it. But if you're handling one dry, I see a lot of people struggling to open them. It's like, no, you got to go forward and then back.
And actually, because we shot that one, I have a weird training on it. Now whenever I handle any sort of pump, I kind of inherently just push forward just a little bit on the pumps for some reason.
On the 97 especially, you notice it because they added that button, so you could just hit the button and pump back, I think. And then it's only, the other way to open it up is to ease the hammer down, then undo the inertial lock by pumping forward and then back. Marlins mess people up, like Marlin hammer fire shotguns, because they have a inertial lock that's sort of like a tip-off. And so you have to let the hammer down and bump the inertial lock in order to open up the action. But then they get confused. So they try to hold down the inertial lock, but really it's just a bump. You could do it in either order. You could bump off the inertial lock, then let the hammer down, or vice versa. Technically, you don't even have to let the hammer down. You just have to hit the firing pin. But
because you can touch it, it's protruding right there on the back.
Yes, but that's also scary because if you have a live shell and you're trying to get it open without firing it,
just touch it delicately.
Yes, you have to you have to depress the firing pin gently into the primer, and then open the action, which is just horrifying. So, yeah, It's wild. The inertial locks on shotguns were probably one of the most confusing things for a while there.
That's fair. All right, next question. What is your process of putting a weapon into storage and taking it out? The conservation process is what he's talking about.
Clean it.
Yep.
And then a little diluted ballast all on there, thin layer.
Yep.
And that's been about it. And we live in a very humid place, and it's been very successful.
We live in a humid place in which things love to rust quickly and easily. Yeah. So weirdly, that has worked, which means it must be doing a damn good job.
Yeah. I know they're sponsored and everything. Ballastol does a really good job of leaving a film. Mm-hmm. Like if you do it right, you get the hang of it, you'll figure it out. If you get it where it leaves a film, that film, unless you like bump it, doesn't harden and it doesn't really flow. Mm-mm. And so as long as it's just the gentle film on there, that stuff will keep things nicely preserved so well in storage. Mm-hmm. What you got to worry about is the thing that people kind of forget about is, so like our display here, the thing I have to check on every once in a while is the fact that I used a softer, just terrible quality pine for the rack because I knew we're going to be picking this stuff up and putting it down over and over again, and I don't want to scratch up the finish. So I wanted a very soft wood.
Yeah.
But that means that everywhere these are in contact with that wood, that pine is, even though it's been painted somewhat, it's leaching whatever oil is on the gun. And so that's exactly where these things try to either rust or the wood on the handguards try to dry out. So you have to think about where things are contacting other things more so than anything else.
Good point. Okay, next question. In your research on the Vali rifles, did you come across any references that use to their use in the West Virginia mine wars?
So off the top of my head, I recall Vetterli's being involved in that, but I can't remember if it was Vetterli Vitalis or just Vetterli's.
Not sure if it's Italian or Swiss.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to remember. Or maybe both.
I bet Bruno would remember off the top of his head.
Oh, yeah, Bruno would know in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And there's some guys that have done deep research on
Bruno's
this.
one of those guys that, like, when he has a piece of information, no matter what it is, it gets locked in his brain. I don't know if it's a photographic memory or he's just a genius, but he remembers that kind of crap easily.
I think going outside and seeing the sun makes you dumber, and that's why he's a genius.
That could be it.
Sorry, Bruno.
Oh.
What was I saying? I knew about it, but I don't know. I thought we mentioned it briefly on one episode.
I want to say we did, but it's been a while.
I don't know.
That was like, oh God, that must have been 80, 90 episodes ago.
Yeah, crap.
We're old.
I have to watch the episode. I mean, I was aware of the use, but now you can see I'm struggling to remember which Vetterli was used. I mean, he's saying the Vitalis, so I assume he was looking at pictures recently. Mm-hmm. It's just that I remember the Swiss ones being way more common in the U.S. surplus market in the early days. But either way, I don't think we covered any detail because we tend to focus on the Marshall. We probably would have just made an offhand comment if it came up.
Fair. All right. We're still good. Why do you think there have been so few long recoil action pistol designs? I mean, they're not great.
Yeah, it's awful. It's really
they're
inefficient.
Uncomfortable to shoot.
Yeah, it takes up a lot more room and metal.
Probably just that.
Yeah, they're just bad. It's bad, dog.
Soldiers don't like using them.
I mean, the most famous one is one that has like a rotating locking bolt. I mean, it's just the Browning lockwork is so much easier. Even the toggle lock of the Luger is easier. Mm-hmm. It's really silly.
Yeah, why would you? Yeah, you wouldn't pick anything that.
It's not actually a strong argument for long recoil in most firearms in general. Mm-hmm. Like it's just long recoil, frankly, is not the best system. So on handguns, it's even more exemplified how it's just a not.
Oh yeah, it's amplified for how much worse it is.
Yeah.
All right. Do you think with continued development, aided with less neglect and ego from its creator, that the Ross rifle could have had a better reputation?
Well, yeah.
Well,
I don't know if it could have gone very far, but it would have had a better reputation.
Yeah, I mean,
I think the Ross was doomed because at its core, it was just
it still had flaws.
Well, the initial Ross was just a copy of the Mannlicher. Like you look at the early ones and you're like, okay, Ross copied the Mannlicher. And then he refined it further and blah, 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 blah. It would kind of have to stop being the Ross rifle to be the best. Because what they did is they took the camways and stuff that are in that bolt. And they tried to serrate them and everything to reduce the amount of interference or the amount of surface contact. Mm-hmm. But it's the same thing we see with the Mannlicher 1895. Long rifles, carbines, whatever. Those helical systems that are not the K31, which use just a simple hole with a bearing in it, essentially. Those ones that have the full contact have full contact. So
Yes.
it's just more surface area to have a problem over. And I don't think at its heart the Ross was the best rifle. I think there were a lot of innovative ideas that were tried, like the dump feed magazines, the rear aperture sights mounted on the receiver.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
The heavy barrels. Like, there were a lot of things that were done correctly on the Ross rifles, but I think its core action was actually a problem. It was a minor problem compared to the problems it saw in service that were frankly just mistakes. I don't know that the core design is what made it so abysmal, but I don't think it made it exceptional either. I think it was kind of neither. It was a middle of the road lock work, excellent sights, excellent focus on being a marksman, and then poor execution of especially the chamber and especially the bolt stop, like where the ruggedization was a problem. So,
All right. Why not the Midwest Industries mini optic mount, possibly on the Red Lion forend for the Spike 2000?
well, so there's a couple things.
Midwest Industries mini optic.
The sub 2000 market has an optional mini mount from Midwest Industries. You already know this thing. We had it previously because I actually bought that before I saw the Red Lion.
Oh.
So it is a device that holds, let's say, a red dot. I think it has a T1 mount or something like that. And you just you rotate it out of the way, fold the gun in half,
I remember that.
and you rotate it back.
Yeah.
And it's on a spring-loaded self-centering thing. I had one. I don't know if it was just me or what. I'm not trying to disparage anybody, but mine wore out very quickly.
Yes, it did.
And it would not hold zero.
Nope.
And it also here...
Remember, we spent must have been an hour on range being
Yeah.
just not being able to sight that thing in.
It was also prone to contamination by sand.
Yes.
Like anything that would, or dirt, anything that would get in there could pop it up or down or canter it somehow. So, not good. And then to be honest with you, it was very annoying because while it did pack fairly flat, it still added some width. And it mounted on the plastic forend with the M-lock panels that were not capable of holding zero. So I don't think the mount necessarily lost zero every time. I think it was mounted on a piece of plastic that didn't want to hold zero.
Sure.
And then, what else was it? Opening it. You have to remember to flip the stupid thing over to open it. So if you're in a hurry, you're like, crack, and you just break it.
Oh, crap.
Because
Well,
you're not, like, if you panic, you're just going to boom. Where it's just...
because it's not like it's locked in place for the
Right.
for the Sub 2000 when it's together, so you could easily just go beep.
Yep. So, those reasons. And
Yeah.
then I'm not sure why I would mount it to the Red Lion, because if I have the Red Lion, I can just rotate the Red Lion.
Yeah.
If I'm in a hurry with the Red Lion, I just fold it open and my irons are there and the gun's ready to go.
Yeah.
And if I have a moment,
There's no getting anything out of the way.
then I can twist it a couple times and flip it over and lock it in, which is about as fast as twisting, flipping, and twisting back the other thing.
Yeah, you're not having to do a whole weird order of operation.
To use the rifle at all, I have to do the extra thing. Whereas with the Red Lion, I can use it instantly or choose to do the extra thing.
Right.
So that's...
Seems superior.
Yeah, it's way
system-wise.
superior to me.
All right. Why did John Browning and everyone else think that a straight blowback pistol can't handle a full power cartridge like 9mm? Spain had the Campo Giro and the Astros.
Neither of those are the examples you think they are. May did not rate either of those terribly high.
Nope.
I'm struggling to think of a
Springs in
full-powered
them.
blowback pistol that I would want to carry instead of a lock breech pistol. You can make them lighter,
Yep.
and they'll last longer with a lock breech.
I would definitely not pick either of those over.
Lock breech is better
Yeah.
with regular. I mean, it's not that nobody's saying it's impossible. They're just saying why. Let's just do the extra steps of making it good.
Stuff's make it good. Do you agree that Cocarno rifles and carbines are still underappreciated?
I mean, yes, of course they are.
Yeah, I love the Cocarno.
I get people making fun of me for saying that they're
We
actually
need to
quite good.
redo the Cocarno episodes.
There's been, people have had improper ammo for them for a while, so they don't perform like they should. That's been a whole thing. And I have to hear about it every time somebody talks about our 6.5 Vetterly episodes because like, well, you had the wrong ammo. And I'm going, but we didn't have the wrong ammo. And then there's at least one person that keeps going around and around with this, and the goalposts move every time. So I'm done arguing about it. We had the correct ammo. The gun had a problem with, one had an unknown problem, and the other had a problem with an unsupported chamber area.
Yep.
We have since done some inspections. We may be revisiting those rifles soon. And I will be even more explicit this time if we revisit them. But the point being is Carcano suffer the same problem because of the wrong ammo being in the commercial market. Mm-hmm. And so people judge them harshly. And also they just feel like crap. When you
they don't feel amazing.
Working the bolt feels like crap on a Carcano. It's not a supported bolt. It doesn't have like a guideway or anything like that. It doesn't have any supports. It just flops around.
And yet it performs. It does perform.
Yes, well, sort of. The clips have problems.
They can if the feed lips get bent.
Like people have feeding problems with Carcanos all the time. But they're reusing 100-year-old clips that were meant to be used once or twice at best.
Oh, yeah.
And there is no source of new clips that are perfectly adjusted. So
you've got to bend them into what they work for you.
Right. As it was issued in good shape, the Carcano was extremely light and very safe in terms of not blowing up or harming the shooter.
Yep.
Although, frankly, they didn't have much in the way of the gas mitigation. They didn't have much in they lacked a lot of features. But, God, they were cheap. You could churn them out even if you're Little Italy. And then they're light and handy, and it turns out that, and I get this all the time, people are kind of like, look, does it really matter? Like, is there that big of a difference between all these bolt-action rifles? And you go, like, in terms of a war, not as big of a difference as you'd think. Because the war is one with material and planning and artillery and planes and what, and then all you need is your infantry to be competent and to be able to deliver in a pinch.
Yeah.
And a lot of rifles can do that. So I feel like the Carcano is sort of one of those things that's been min-maxed right into this one perfect corner of we want it cheap, we want it light, we want it fast, and we want it safe.
Yes.
And that's just, and that we're not going to give a whole ton of energy or effort to exceeding these capacities because we're not using the most powerful cartridge.
No, we just need a lot of those. Just give us a lot of that.
It's using like a fairly calm 6.5 millimeter cartridge compared to what other people were fielding at the time.
Right.
Which therefore means you don't have to have this crazy bulked up safety margin. And it turns out they're kind of right. You didn't really need that much range. You didn't really, it was not, it wasn't a stupid gun like everybody thinks it was. The Mosin was a stupid gun. The Mosin was designed poorly.
Mosin hate.
For dumb reasons. The Carcano was actually somebody knowing their limits. And therefore, they didn't break the bank. I mean, look at the Greeks with the Mannlicher Schonauer.
Oh, God, they broke the bank with that.
The Mannlicher Schonauer.
was not bright.
Remember that time Greece had all the rifles they needed for the Great? Oh, no, they didn't.
No.
They had to go bumming rifles from everybody because they couldn't make their own. And the one they bought was the most expensive one they could lay hands on. And it didn't work. Meanwhile, Italy's in a war. Guess what they could do? Make their own rifles because they weren't that hard to make.
Greece is shaking its tiny fist at you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, they just... Look, it's not perfect, but they could make it with the machinery that they had at the time, and then way into the future, it was like, well, Jesus, we'll just dust that thing off and make some more,
Fair. Let's take a pause for the goodness. Okay. All right, next one. Which World War I pistol cartridge would you pick? Sorry, like he was going to he's freaking me out. Which would you pick to replace 9mm as the global standard? And he had 8mm Steyr with a question mark.
Yeah, it's a viable option.
Yeah.
I mean, 9mm Largo is okay. It actually looked like it might become the standard for a while.
Even 9mm Steyr would be
9mm Steyr would have been all right. The problem is they're all slightly longer, and I'm struggling to think of a shorter 9mm. There's 380, but to be honest with you, I suspect if it weren't for 9mm Parabellum, the emergent handgun cartridge would have been 38 ACP.
Yeah.
The 38 Colt Auto, like in the Trials 1900, 1902, that kind of pistol. I think that would have, because you even saw Webleys being made in that cartridge, like Webley Fosbury's.
Sure.
And Webley self-loaders, I believe, were made in that cartridge too.
Oh, really?
So,
that'd be cool.
Yeah, the Anglosphere was starting to take on that cartridge. 9mm Parabellum before World War I wasn't spreading to anybody other than Germany by much.
Was the Webley self-loader scaled down then for that cartridge?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's like a tiny one.
Yeah, they have a little South African mark.
Oh, that's adorable.
I wouldn't say tiny, but, it's to scale.
Well, I mean, they had to because that spring in there, like, in order to get it all the way back, they had to scale everything down.
I'll find you one to look at. You'll
that'd
be very
funny.
happy.
I want to see it.
We have photos of one. We photographed
I don't remember.
Anyway.
It's been a long time. I don't have the memory y'all got. All right. Why didn't anybody make a lower power cartridge when going with shorter, lighter, short-range rifles such as the Lee Enfield No. 5 or Mosin M44 to make less recoil punishing over full-powered rounds?
To make recoil less punishing over full power. They used to do that in the late 1800s. And then they stopped. They wanted one service cartridge so that they only had one service cartridge.
Well, it makes sense. All the tooling to get spun up for multiples would be crazy.
But you're making multiple cartridges. You're trying to not to mix them up. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
You know? Also, if you think about it in terms of, I mean, I guess you could make it the same bore, so you could save the same rifling, but then your rifling's not optimized for the speed of your bullet.
No.
Necessarily. If
So
you have two different,
have heating issues there.
So if you want to just use one type of rifling on everything, then you need it to be the same, you know.
Across the board.
I mean, close at least.
Yeah.
And then again, it's mostly just logistics. It's, hey, look, we can handle them with this recoil. It's not the end of the world. Although it's not impossible to find things that were done that way. Look at the weird little 9mm destroyer carbines. Those are fun.
Yeah, fun.
The M1 carbine is a semi-automatic, not a bolt action, but it was designed with its own cartridge for exactly the reason you're saying, is to keep it under control and keep it light. But generally, no, because they don't want to introduce a whole other thing. You figure you have these troops that are not, they're not the main body of your force, so they are this exception to the rule. You just want to be able to issue them out ammo from the main pile that is the rule. If you have to put in special attention for a minority of your troops, then you've got a huge nightmare over a minority of your troops.
Yes.
If that helps.
No, I agree. All right, next one. Guns like the Ultimax that utilize constant recoil seem to offer enormous benefit to light and medium machine guns. Why have so few militaries adopted this technology? Isn't it really difficult or expensive?
No, it's not that bad.
Oh, okay.
I have no clue.
Oh.
To be fair, I couldn't name 5 current service rifles, so I don't.
Yeah, that's not where our focus has been for research.
There's some other guys that cover modern, and I don't do it. To put it this way, I haven't read a single article about a gun made after 1940 in 10 years. So I can't. It sucks, but trying to do the documentary series, I read what I need for the episodes every 2 weeks.
Well, you're having to read a minimum between 4 and like 6 different books to scour them for details that you need. And maybe not the full books, maybe portions depending on what the books talk about.
I'm pounding 600 to 1,000 pages of raw, like material, not fluff, but material, every other week. And then on top of that, I'm having to pre-scout what we're doing next enough to understand where it lays in. And we're not filming any videos on modern machine guns for any planning whatsoever in the next 10 years. I mean, not that we could never do it, but it's not in the plans at all. We have so many other things we want to cover. Right. So I've just read 0. I have not read 3 pages on the 249. I know that the 249 is a gun. I vaguely know where it evolved from because of pre-knowledge before starting the show. But the stuff I've read on 249 was over 10 years ago.
Fair.
And that's not even a modern, you know?
Yeah. All right, next question. What military do you think missed the biggest opportunity in terms of small arms in the post-World War I era? What military?
Missed the biggest... Wait, which military missed the biggest opportunity? Well, all of them failed on optics. The entire sniper program was abandoned. A lot of them failed to recognize the power of the submachine gun.
Yeah, because like MP-18, that was a pretty big step, and turns out that was a really good direction to step into.
France probably is the biggest loser in terms of having the most developmental potential and the least execution, because they had pre-World War I semi-automatic trials that were frankly modern enough to be World War II semi-automatics.
That's right, they did.
And then even after that, they left World War I considering essentially intermediate cartridges, considering certain types of submachine guns. Like, there's a lot of French development stuff where I don't know what was going on.
But they left it all on the editing floor.
Yeah, they were really good about predicting the future in certain things, and then it just died in committee. So there's a lot of wonder weapons in the firearms world that should have made it into World War II that never did.
Fair.
There's also a lot of little things. Like the Polish V35, I know that was a gun that they wanted to make double action, and it ended up being single action only. And then that could have positioned it to be a really strong contender.
Are they planning on making it double action only or just also double action?
I can't recall. Well, no, it wouldn't be double action only because you can still cock the hammer, but most people don't tend to think of pistols as DAO / triple action or whatever. It's just not how people think about them. But I do know that there had been, they for financial reasons, they didn't want to convert it to double action, but even though it's single stack, you would have had very close to a 1-9 at that point. Because P38 gets a lot of credit, but if they had gone through with their plan, you know, it would have been a P38 killer for sure.
Sure.
But those are little tiny things that don't really matter. I think what matters is that France could have had fairly broad semi-automatic, if not intermediate cartridge rifles and carbines going into World War II if they had just actually pulled stuff out of their prototype side and put it down on the ground. But that's kind of true of a number of countries. It's just that France paid, to my knowledge anyway, and it's limited, France paid the most attention to those potentials and actually developed them somewhat and then backed off. Whereas everybody else just went, well, that's kind of neat, but I don't know. And then they just didn't really pick it up at all, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Another question. When the Lebel was introduced, there was a race to develop and equip nearly every military fighting force with smokeless power weapons. Did that same type of arms race happen in the sporting civilian world too?
No.
Wait, with smokeless powder?
Right, he's saying did the civilian world suddenly go, we gotta get everything in smokeless and it needs to be the best smokeless gun?
Yeah, I don't see why it would actually.
No, it could have. I mean, it could have been a push, but the problem is your average sportsman wasn't that concerned about it because the powders hadn't stabilized to the point that they were universally accepted. There was this whole load conversion thing. You can actually find this. There's old conversion tables between black powder and early smokeless brands, and every brand had a totally different conversion. It was actually, for a civilian shooter, a logistical nightmare.
So it was just easier to just go with what they knew.
Right. Most guys,
Yeah,
they had already bought their gun or whatever. A lot of people, by the time of smokeless, actually buying cartridges preloaded was fairly well established. And so people were just sort of buying what fit in their gun, and they either liked the gun or they didn't like the gun. You definitely do see more small bore repeating things turning up post smokeless. Probably the most famous smokeless cartridge in the civilian world is 3030, which was like the one that there were ones that predated. You know what I mean? There's smokeless cartridges that really start hitting the market, but nobody fully captures the attention of the sportsman until 3030. And 3030 just became like the North American game cartridge for quite a while. It's still popular today. And then you start seeing like 35 and blah, 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 you know, stuff developing off of it.
Right.
But, you know, did it have an effect? Yes. Was it this mad panic? No. Because if you look, most of that stuff tends to turn up in the mid-90s to late 90s, 1890s. Whereas militaries were trying to get smokeless rifles in their hands, the big ones, within like 2 years of the Lebel appearing in like 80, you know, it's the 86 model, but people saw it in 87.
Yeah.
And then you have the Germans with the 88, like they're,
Oh, they're like, oh crap, gotta get on that.
And then, you know, from there, everybody proliferates out, you know, Belgians in 89, blah, blah, blah. But you don't see a lot of famous smokeless 1880s or even like first couple of years of 1890s commercial guns. As a matter
Shotguns,
of fact, the Winchester 93 famously suffered from not being smokeless enough. And so, like we just said a moment ago, you end up fixing it in 97, you know.
It's impressive.
The Marlin 98, you know, that's way later on. Anyway.
Let's see here. Any theories as to why the Portuguese were able to make a carbine short rifle version of the Kropatschek while the French felt they had to go to the Berthier?
I think it's just they were willing to accept the problems with it. It has, you know, limited capacity, especially with the full-length cartridges, and then poor balance for limited capacity. So, and there's no quick loading option, you know? Although there's no quick loading option. It's honestly, the Portuguese adoption of the Kropatschek is a little strange anyway, because boy, they adopted that right as other things were coming out that were better.
Yeah.
But they wanted a carbine, and that's what they had adopted, and they wanted consistency through their product line. Whereas the French were going,
maybe tube loading is not a way we should continue to go.
They also probably didn't have, this is a guess, but they probably didn't have as distinct of a cavalry program, because we saw this in our 1911 episodes. The U.S. cavalry had a big voice in terms of semi-automatic pistols because they were the only ones that were banking on them. I suspect the French probably had something similar to this, where the cavalry or specialty troops had a big voice on carbines, because they're going, yeah, but we have to use them. And
this isn't going to work. Yeah.
And so the infantry are like, look at all these shots we get, and it's fine. It's not that much weight. And then the cavalry are going, guys, if you just got this other magazine, it'd be fine. And they're going, yeah, but the infantry will break it. And then you're going, yeah, okay, then give us that one and give them the other one, which some countries did do. Whereas in this case, they probably, we can't do that. Everybody's getting the same thing. and then we're just going to make it shorter. It's fine.
Sure. Fair. Okay. Next question. What have been the most interesting and general small wars to you both? Oh, okay. So just small wars that we've
Yeah, we
happened
covered other
upon.
wars.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't really covered the wars. We just
No, but we've like talked about like we bring up the Boer Wars like almost every other episode.
Yeah, Boer War's fascinating.
Yeah.
I think this guy actually made a comment about the War of the Pacific, which I find to be a very interesting conflict, although it's more the politics of it than the actual ground fighting. Although I'm not the biggest naval man, to be honest with you. The one that I find to be very influential that people really overlook is the Russo-Japanese War. We mentioned that a lot on our show.
Yeah.
Russo-Japanese War was very eye-opening for the machine gun, and people did not notice. I think those are more medium-sized. I wouldn't call them small wars.
So what would be a small war?
Uh,
Like uprisings of the what was the name of those guys that bandaged their arms or like tied them up so that
Are you
they
talking about the Philippines, the Moros?
Yeah, like the Moros.
Yeah, so like the suppression of the Philippines, that would be a
maybe
small
that's
war.
a small one, yeah. That was interesting.
Honestly, but that's less that war and more the policing of the Philippines is very fascinating because you find out they were mostly giving their police like, you say police, but they're almost more, they said constabulary too, but it's almost like a gendarme, but a very hot gendarme. Those guys were given single shot black powder shotguns. I mean, very intentionally. I mean, we covered it. I kept that commercial one that we bought. I bought a shotgun inexpensively to do that episode because I thought it was so interesting. So
that's fascinating.
there's a lot of little stuff that has gotten sort of put along by the wayside that I'd like to get further into as well, but it's going to take us time to get to it as well.
Yeah, time, and then a whole other series of episodes probably just to cover the wars. We still need...
Understanding South American conflicts is wild.
It is fascinating. And the politics involved too, yeah.
Yeah, it's just little disputes but there's big money on the line, and then pride gets into it, and then, it was my alarm this time. Pride gets into it, and then...
Mine too.
Oh, we both have an alarm.
We both have a 10 o'clock
It's almost
alarm.
like the dog has to get her pill. So, I forgot what I was saying.
But it's fascinating.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's, South American politics is just insane to me. I'm trying to keep up with them as wild, especially because you have the Germans and other countries just laid over it, stirring the pot. And oh, God.
Poor guys.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a pause and we'll come back in a little bit.